Good morning, everybody. We are still waiting on at least one more piece of language to get printed up, but that's okay. We can get started. If you on your chair, you should have found new language for 3 areas that got worked on since we last met. Okay. Well, you need one. So the new language, thank you. That's old. That's old language. The new one that you weren't given yet, that has been worked on since we met last time, starts with the top of the page says E8 National Board Certification. So if you need that for today because it has the new language. Okay, we are going to do our hurry up offense by letting people take breaks on their own. So just remember, don't all leave at once. But we don't have any planned breaks. But it doesn't work if you all walk out. So stay in the room as much as you can and hang with us. Behind here is our order of events. We may change things a little bit as we go because there may be some things that we weren't sure were finished and they're finished, etc. And we're going to begin with the grounding. So I'm going to hand it off to Mike.
We're going to count off by 4 again, and we're going to start to my right. And
1, 2, 3.
Kathleen's 4.
Nancy's 1.
2.
Mike's 3.
4. 2, 3, 4. 1,
2, 3, 4. 1, 2,
3, 4. 2, 3, 4.
All right. So let's all stand up. And we're going to make a small circle of 1s right there in that quadrant, 2s in that quadrant, 3 in this quadrant, and 4s over here.
At least it's only water.
And I'm going to ask you to determine who has worked in the district the longest in your group, who has worked in the district the longest in your group, the longest tenure with BVSD, and you're going to be the facilitator. Yeah, the facilitator will speak last, and they'll choose a direction for today. This group got small. Somebody couldn't. Exactly. All right. So hopefully everybody has a facilitator. You've picked the direction, and here's what we want you to say. Introduce yourself and your relationship to bargaining. What are your expectations for our work today, and how do you feel about being here? Everyone had a chance to speak at least once? All right, let's return to our seats. So we're going to get right to task, but before we do that, I want to share just two quick reasons that we do a grounding. One is that it helps you become present, because when we ask you how you feel about being here, you have to forget about what you were doing as you were leaving the house, and for a minute you have to forget about what you have to do yet today. And so you kind of become in the present. And the other one is it gives everybody a chance to speak and therefore have their voice in the room, and everyone is more likely to participate than as we move forward. So we really like to do a grounding every time we meet.
Okay, and I want to point out that these are the conditions for consensus. You have your documents? Okay, great. These are the conditions we need to reach consensus. We have to have a commitment, we have to have trust, we have to have a common goal, and we have to have active participation. And I just want to speak about that a minute. There's even an idea on our agenda about active participation. It's an issue that has even come up and been lifted up into this discussion. So you have to have active participation in order to get the best ideas on the table. And you'll notice a lot of the things we do are in order to flatten the hierarchy in this type of discussion and to create that active participation so no one feels they've been shut out or shut up. So we're able to actually bring up things that might be emotional and have emotional content without losing our focus. So clear process and creating sufficient time, and you have definitely done that in this process. So just want to remind you this is not a thing to bring up. Consensus process is not something to use all the time. It's something that you can probably do once or twice a year in a school and maybe once in a district. So it's very extensive. All right, and that is my part.
And then you're going to do the first one.
Oh, yeah, I'll do the first one.
Okay, so just a quick reminder that we've sent a lot of the work out to be done in small work groups, and those work groups have put in a significant amount of time delving into the issue, and they're presenting their proposed language to us today. One of the phrases we use in this work is, trust the people, trust the process. And there's no way that this whole group could have been writing this language and discussing the details of every issue that we bring up today. So we really want to respect the work of these individual work groups because they did put a significant amount of time into these proposals that they're bringing today.
Okay, and I think we can start with our first one because you have the language for that now, Mike, and he's going to hand that around. So our first issue is the language for one-time payout eligibility, and that is being handed around to you. Who will be presenting this language? Bill, are you presenting this language? Sure. Okay. So here's the process. As this gets passed around, I'll just remind you, we're going to start with having a presenter present the language. Okay, and then we're going to have one responder. And that person is going to answer the questions of what they heard, how they feel about what they heard, things like that. But I want to ask the responder, don't take notes. So part of this process is just an opportunity to say what you heard, the main things, and you don't have to reiterate all of it. And you have a backup. So if there's that person can add details, so you don't have to be perfect. In fact, it's better if you're not perfect. It's just really, just challenge yourself to really listen and to rely on your friends to back you up, okay? So, Bill, will you choose a responder for your item?
Patty.
Patty's a responder. And Patty, who would be your backup?
My backup is going to be James.
James, okay. So I'm going to turn my mic off and give it over to you.
So I believe this is largely unchanged since the version we looked at a couple weeks ago. Little formatting difference. I think one of the things that changed, it said salary before, and now it says regular wages, to differentiate between what somebody's salary is versus wages they earned, because this won't apply to a salary that somebody might have had during a leave of absence, but would apply to the wages that they earned after they came back from a leave of absence or something like that. So what else? Do I have to read the whole thing?
No, just tell the story and what's different.
Oh, that's about it.
All right, Patty, this is for you, and I'll talk while you're grabbing that microphone. How do you feel about what you heard? First of all, what did you hear? How do you feel about what you heard? Do you feel this language addresses the issue, meets the needs of all affected parties, and helps facilitate our best possible outcomes? Do you have any questions or clarifications? So now that's a lot of questions.
I was going to say that.
We're not being graded on your completion of answering. It just sort of gives you.
Usually not that many questions.
Right. Well, we're trying to finish today.
Okay.
Okay.
Gracias. Buenos días. So what I heard Bill say is that is not much change from what we addressed 2 weeks ago. Just some clarifications to make sure, and the formatting, and to make sure that it's clear that is in reference to wages earned for the 2020-2021 school year, and not someone's salary. And if someone's been on leave of absence, just to clarify that for the whole year, they will not be receiving the one-time payout. I feel that this clarity is very important because it was part of the conversations we had, and I'm glad that we have clearer language to address this. What was the other question? I feel really good about this language.
Fantastic. James, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Now, for everyone else in the group, thank you for giving us a little reminder of what was said. General group, are there any more questions or clarifications at this time?
I have one area.
We have two. Terry?
I guess
Test.
Thank you. So a quick question, when you're talking about wages, Bill, would this include extra duty contracts that, because that is a wage that someone has earned this year? So I just wanted to clarify that piece.
It would not include extra duty contract because that's not regular wages. They're extra wages. It would include stipends, the 5% national teacher, longevity for other employee groups. So that's the sort of differentiation between that.
Thank you.
I have one overall question. Is this meeting being televised, and do we have any remote participants?
We are live streaming, and I didn't hear that second part.
Are there any remote participants that we have that we need to be aware of?
Amela, are there remote participants?
No, okay, perfect. And then the other question is, so ultimately, in the first or second June board meeting, we're going to approve the budget that includes the changes in this, that reflect what we do today. How do we, as a board member, know when we approve something, whether we're jeopardizing something else? So we're going to add up all these costs today, which is great. So, can you flag me when we're going into money that's going to have to be reallocated or something like that? Or can I assume that we can cover everything we talk about today?
Yes. Certainly, so we've got a preliminary budget update tomorrow night at a work session. So there will be changes included in that. And then if there were something brought forward today that is not included in that discussion or has not been included yet, I'll certainly bring that up. One thing I think that's important to note about this payout, and we'll have to address it in a sort of separate function with the board, I think, it is occurring in the current fiscal year, not next fiscal year. It'll get paid out in June or July. It'll get accrued back because it's for related to wages earned in the current year. So it's not actually coming out of next year's budget, it's coming out of this year's budget. And so it's all been accounted for, but we'll, I don't know, bring a resolution or something forward to the board to say that the board authorizes this additional payment to staff.
Okay,
Current year.
and then with something like this, is our assumption that we'll be extending the same payout to other employees that are not part of Unit B, such as our principals?
Correct. The conversation has been that this is for all staff in the district.
Okay, and I can assume then that we have the money to cover that for all staff, even though we're just talking about Unit B today?
Correct.
Okay, great, because that's important to me.
Yeah, and that was one of the important things about some of the language to include in this, is to make sure that it's fairly consistent for all employee types, that we're not going down a path of having to have 10 different structures of language. This should be, this language is pretty broad enough to cover all employee types.
Okay, thank you for those questions. Are there any more questions or clarifications from the group? Scott?
Okay, it says employees must be currently employed. I'm thinking of a teacher in my building who worked the entire year but was non-renewed.
They are still employed through the end of the year.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
One other clarification, we are sending this language over to the para-legal team to make sure that it is, we want to make sure para says, yes, it's para-includable before we make the payment, and so that's getting clarified. It should be fine because it has that in lieu of wage increases for the current year kind of thing. That should be enough to make sure it's okay by them, but we're going to verify that. And as it says, we'll get together if there's anything that needs to be changed to make sure it's para-includable.
Okay, one more.
Just to follow up on Tina's question, this includes hourly workers, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Test. Okay, any more questions? Clarifications? Okay, is there any disagreement with moving forward with this proposal as it is now? Is there any disagreement with moving forward with this proposal as it is now? Well, congratulations, you have a tentative agreement. Give yourselves a hand. Okay, let's ask, we're going to have you guys TA on the list, visible to all, or You can, actually, we don't have a list that's not erasable, but we did do paper copies before. Does anybody have a copy of it? Oh, this is a new thing. Okay, so wherever you're going to sign it, we ask you to maybe come to the table and TA this one. I think Nancy does have a copy with all the signatures.
She's the keeper.
Keeper of the copies, okay.
So while they're doing that, we're going to move to middle level planning for our next issue. So you can find that new language that was just updated. And
I'm going to honor this group too.
think about who's presenting and who you want as a listener, and we still have a little work to do on this one. So.
All right, if you worked on this proposal and it's the compensation group, come on, stand in the middle. Let's all stand up. Let's have the compensation group, work group, come out to the middle.
The one we just finished?
Yep.
Yeah, compensation work group. You were there. All right, and I'd like to ask someone with the microphone, who's holding one? Nobody. Ah, you guys are so clever. Okay, I'll ask David to honor this group and all their hard work.
All right, you guys did an incredible job, and from all of us here, we want to thank you for the work you put in on this, and your commitment to our school district and all the different groups within it. Thank you.
Who will be presenting middle level planning language? We got a couple people? Is that?
A question, just one second. Question that maybe we could do the new language national board certification
Okay,
first.
we can
Let's
do
do that
that.
one next. Okay.
All right, so we'll change the plan. We're going to do national board certification. And who will be presenting on that?
She's delegating really well lately.
So
Okay.
Patty, you want to pick a responder?
Yes, I will pick Nativity.
Nativity? Where is Nativity? Over here? Okay, there she is. You want to pick a backup? Okay. So Patty, tell us about what we need to know on this language.
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how our nationally board certified teachers under contract language receive a 5% stipend. And that certification has to be renewed every 5 years. Since 2019, House Bill 191036 introduced the language that nationally board certified psychologists and counselors through the state will be eligible for the state stipend. Therefore, we brought 2 weeks ago, or when we started this process, our interest in adding psychologists and counselors that receive, and their national boards are called different, have a different title, so the National Association of School Psychologists, NASP, or the National Board for Certified Counselor, NBCC, as I said, stated in that bill. So through the compensation subcommittee, we discussed the 5% stipend that is going to be rolled out in the next 2 years, 2.5 for 21-22, 2.5%, and then for the following year, 22-23, the additional 2.5 until we come to the total on the third year of 5%, just like our nationally board certified teachers. So language had to be added because we did have some details to make sure that there was no double dipping. Did you want me to actually read the new language, Mike?
Well, if you want to just highlight the key
Okay,
changes
yeah.
that are also applied to National Board Certified Teachers as well.
Yes, so now, teachers, that is very clear here about employees. We did also clarify some language just for clarity about the SLP position, which is the speech and language professionals. We just made that language a little bit clearer because there was a change there who were hired in July, prior to July 31st, 2017, will continue to receive the 5%, but after that, anyone that was hired after that date does not. And that was negotiated back in 2018 with the SLPs. The next change is make sure we clarify the 2.5 and the 2.5 the next 2 years until it goes to 5%. And you have to be in a non-probationary status to receive the stipend. And the coursework we call it double dipping, but it means you cannot move horizontally, use those credits that you might receive for those classes to move horizontally in the schedule. You also must be in good standing, meaning that at no point your evaluation can be partially effective, your whole evaluation, and you need to be in an effective or above in order to receive the stipend. And what else? Let me think. Oh, and you must be working in the position in which you are certified. So if you change to a totally different position within the district, then you would not be eligible for the stipend because you're not working in the area where you've been certified. And we will continue to review this. If there's individual cases that are impacted, Human Resources and BVEA, we always meet to discuss if there might be any exceptions.
Okay, thank you. So Nativity, briefly, what did you hear? How do you feel about it? And what is your own perception of the issue?
Okay, what I heard Patty say was that they reviewed the National Board Certification stipend. The state has added psychs and counselors to the state language, and so therefore their proposal is to add that to the BVSD with a rollout over the course of 3 years with 2.5% starting in August, and then, 2 years, in 2 years at 2.5%, getting them to the 5%. Some of the qualifiers were non-probationary status. Employees cannot use the credits to double dip. The evaluation must not be partially effective, and they must be in the current position of their certification.
Okay, and how do you feel about this language?
I feel good.
Okay. Melissa, would you like to add anything? No? We're good? Are there any questions or concerns? Kathy? Let's see. I got it on.
I'm just curious, Bill, what's the fiscal note?
For the current, there's about 50. There's like 50, there are 53 people that currently have this certification. It's about $250,000 for the 5% for all of those folks. And so it's about half of that for each of the year. So 125 in the next year and then 125 the year after.
Okay, any other questions or comments about National Board Certification language? Any other questions Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask, is there any disagreement with moving forward with the proposed language on national board certification that you just heard? Is there any? It's on.
Not a disagreement. I just want to clarify that this isn't national board certification. These are national certifications that we are now agreeing to recognize. Right, we've always recognized national board certified teachers in really significant ways. I just want to, for the public and for everybody to understand that we've agreed to recognize these other national certifications. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Great, thank you. So seeing no disagreement, shall we have the appropriate parties sign off on this one right out here at the center? What's that?
I'd like to give thanks to the team when it's their turn.
Okay, while they're finishing that up, if we could have everybody that worked on this subgroup come to the center. Let's all stand again, just to keep from sitting too long at a time. So Carla has graciously asked to recognize this group. So.
Wow, thank you. It's been 10 years that my colleagues have been requesting this, and this is the group that has heard them. And for my colleagues who all work hard and who've been holding the students up through these crises, as well as the teachers, I can't tell you how much we appreciate standing up to the concept of equity and excellence, because exactly having certification is excellence. And I can't thank you enough. I appreciate it. I know it was hard work. You did the right thing. Thank you.
Okay, our next group is going to be middle level, and you have in your packet a middle level proposal, but this group was really working overtime, did a little bit last minute change. So that is coming around to everybody. And I wanted to see who is going to present for this group for middle level. Looks like it's Katie. And Katie, would you like to pick a responder?
Sure. Let's see here. I'm going to go with Lori.
Lori. Okay, and Lori, we're going to ask you to have a backup. Would you like to pick one?
How about Margaret?
Margaret, okay. Are you on? Okay. I think everybody has it in front of them now, so go ahead and present.
Okay. Well, we met in the last couple weeks and did, I think, some really, really great work with the district and BVEA, and so I'll just read the MOU and go through it. This Memorandum of Understanding sets the terms and understanding between the BVSD and BVEA to increase planning time for teachers at the middle school level. Background: BVSD and BVEA mutually recognize that political decisions and election outcomes 25 years ago have led to major inequities, specifically in terms of planning time for middle-level teachers in district schools. Our two groups further recognize that sufficient teacher-directed planning time is essential to the provision of high-quality instruction for all students as outlined by the district's strategic plan. Finally, both groups recognize their historic commitment to site-based shared decision-making. Purpose: this MOU will set conditions for planned disbursement to middle schools of $1,150,000, with said monies to be utilized exclusively for implementing locally devised solutions to increase teacher plan time. Monies will be allocated on a per-pupil basis. In support of this initiative, between August and October 31st, 2021, Middle schools will use a consensus-style shared decision-making model to develop plans for how to use their site's allocated funds to increase teacher plan time. All schools will use a consistent process with outside facilitators who are trained in and will use the Chadwick method to reach group consensus. Building shared decision-making groups will continue to meet in the spring semesters of 2022, 2023, and 2024 to monitor and make adjustments to implementations as needed. Schools will be encouraged to develop means of increasing teacher planning time in ways that work best for their respective sites. Avenues to be considered might include changes to daily instructional schedules, the hiring of a licensed teacher, hiring educational support professionals to supervise study halls, hiring building substitute teachers, and other means as might be devised by the building level shared decision-making groups. Create and implement a district-wide committee by September 21st, 2021, charged with developing recommendations regarding the need for increased planning time for middle-level teachers. Prior to March 1st of 2022, 2023, and 2024, this committee will monitor and make recommendations for considerations aligned with the budgeting process. The task force shall consider, but will not be limited to, what are the unique needs of middle school students and how can increased planning time enhance the education experience for these students? What practices are currently in place to increase middle teacher planning time, both as a result of the increase in funding and prior to the increase? What resources do we currently provide and which additional resources could be brought to bear? Study of the question of how current district practice aligns with the middle level essentials and whether our current district leadership and community values call for further alignment. The working group shall be composed of 12 members but may be expanded as needed. The group shall be composed of the following members: 6 middle level educators, including 1 PK through 8 middle school, 2 middle level principals, 1 PK principal, PK8 principal, 1 superintendent or designee, 1 association president or vice president, 1 member of the BVEA Negotiations team. Funding. BVSD will disperse $1,150,000 in August of 2021. For 2022 and 2023, every effort shall be made to increase this amount as yearly budgets are developed. Duration. This MOU is at will and may be modified by mutual consent of authorized officials from BVSD and BVEA. This MOU shall become effective upon signature by the authorized officials from BVSD and BVEA and will remain in effect until modified or terminated by any one of the partners by mutual consent. In the absence of mutual agreement by the authorized officials from BVSD and BVEA, this MOU shall end on May 31st, 2024.
All right, Lori.
Okay, so there's a new MOU of understanding that's being proposed to work on increasing planning time for teachers at the middle level. And this is to address 25 years of inequity of planning time for teachers at the middle level. And there's a recognition that teachers need sufficient planning time in order to provide quality instruction for students. The purpose is to set the conditions for how to distribute the funds of $1,150,000 at each middle level. They're going to use a consensus style at each site to develop a plan for their site specific that will best meet the needs of the students at that school. This is going to be used through outside facilitators using the Chadwick model, and it's going to occur over the next 3 years. The schools will consider a lot of different options that have been proposed and additional ones that may arise. Let's see, daily instruction schedule that the students might have, ways to shift that around, using licensed teachers and hiring them, hiring educational support professionals, substitute teachers, building, let's see what else. I guess different kinds of study halls that might be supervised by the educational support professionals. And in addition to what happens at the site, there's going to be a district-wide committee to look at the following things: the unique needs of middle school students and how to increase the planning time for those students. They're going to consider things that are currently in place, what kind of resources are already in place, and what additional resources could be brought to bear. And they're going to look at the question of how district practices align with middle school essentials and revisit that whole topic. And then there's a list of all the different people that are going to be on this committee. And again, it's going to go for the next 3 years.
All right, you answered almost all my questions, but let me just ask them in case you have something to add, and then Margaret, you'll be backing her up, not as what we heard, but on these questions, because she did a great job on that. How do you feel about what you heard? Do you feel this language addresses the issue, meets the needs of all affected parties, and helps facilitate our best possible outcomes? And do you have any questions or clarifications?
I think that this working group that met the last time after our last negotiation session are incredibly creative people, and that this is a really good plan for moving forward. And I especially like how it gives a voice to the site, because each site knows the unique needs of their students. And I feel like this is going to be highly successful. And I don't really have any questions. I think everything was addressed and thought of, and I think it's pretty amazing, the plan that was come up, and I think it's going to make a really big difference.
Okay, it looks like Rob wants to jump in here.
I apologize, don't mean to speak out of order. I just want to add a little bit of context for everyone in this group and the public. As you remember, the last time we had this discussion in this room, we just had some work to do in regards to where we were. Again, I want to thank all of the folks that have been working on this. So the $1.15 million, I think it's important to explain to everybody how that came to be. These are dollars that we redistributed from other priorities that we had put in the preliminary budget. And so, board members, this is not dollars that would be new in regards to that preliminary budget. We repurposed $300,000 that was set aside for working on substitute issues under the idea that with more planning time in middle schools, there would be that in turn would reduce the number of teacher absences potentially. That we took $500,000 that was set aside for ongoing for curriculum. And then also there was $350,000 that since we presented the preliminary budget was designated as new dollars, and we repurposed those dollars for this priority as something that was a priority of BVEA and the district. But I just wanted to be really clear that I think Bill said this last time. You can do anything you want. You just can't do everything that you want. And so I want to thank Bill. Bill and I dug into the preliminary budget and appreciate the group for the 7 hours that we spent on Monday working through this.
Thank you so much for that context. Margaret, what did you hear? How do you feel about what you heard? Do you feel this language addresses the issue, meets the needs of all affected parties, and helps facilitate our best possible outcomes? And do you have any questions or clarifications?
So I feel great. I'm really excited that we've been able to have a conversation to start the ball rolling for middle level planning. I think that there's a lot of long-term commitment on both sides. The idea of having the consensus model in the buildings is helpful for teachers and for staff to feel connected to the larger scope of the work. And I don't remember the last question. No, I have 0 questions.
Okay. Now, we're going to open this up to the general group. And are there any more questions from any members of the group or clarifications at this time? You can grab a mic. And then Tina. It's going to be David, then Tina.
I just wanted to say a couple things about why this is such a significant and high quality step. I want to recognize that the district is showing a significant commitment to this, and we really appreciate that. Also, the last session, Tina, you were mentioning how we needed time. We make sure we want to make the community feel involved in this. So I think this also does that by giving us a working group and an ability to get that publicize what we're doing and giving people a chance to weigh in and not rushing to change the middle school schedule as quickly as what our possible proposals did before. So I think that's really great. And we just feel really good about where we are with this. We feel like it's a significant step, but it's not too fast. And the last thing, we did want to add one thing under who would participate in this group, and where it says 6 middle-level educators, including one from PK8 middle school, we would like that to read BVEA members, teachers who are BVEA members. So we want to write that in.
Go ahead, Tina.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And I think this sounds great. It's to slow this down a little bit. But I just want to recognize that we clearly didn't provide the relief for middle school teachers that we had talked about. And we know and recognize that there's a sense of urgency around fixing that. And of course, the 6 middle-level educators that also are participating on the work group still don't have more planning time and need to teach. So I do recognize that too. So that's, but I'm really glad that this is where we are. I had a question that's really, really nitpicky. Well, one is, how is the 1,000,015, is that being distributed equally among our middle schools in PK through 8, or is that to be determined? Who's doing that? Just equal, and it doesn't it doesn't matter how big the middle school is.
Per pupil.
Per pupil. Okay, got it. Okay, and then
Hello?
per pupil.
Per
yeah.
pupil, thanks.
And then the other question I have is, the consensus style decision happens between August and October, but then a district-wide committee is formed in September. How do those committees and that timing, how do those interplay? Are they...
So here's my understanding, and certainly anybody who was part of our meeting on Monday, feel free to weigh in. I think the group in September will start to look at kind of the long-range issues. To your point, Tina, we don't think this is fully solved. We think that this is a good faith effort and step in the right direction. And so a committee at the district level will continue to look at how could we continue to expand middle-level planning, taking a look at what are the solutions that are created locally, how do we scale those that are working incredibly well. And then locally, the decision needs to be made on how do they want to begin to allocate those dollars at the school. I think as we talked, we realized that there was not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution here. So we wanted to give space and put some kind of timelines around a commitment to make sure that we figure this out and not wait too long, because then these dollars wouldn't be allocated in the ways that they needed to be allocated. So I think that's the difference on the two timelines, and that the group that we would form in September would work over multiple years and continue to look at this issue.
Okay, and then the group that is, the district group is not bound by the Chadwick method. Those are just the site level groups that you're doing the commitment to the Chadwick method.
And there's some intentional language down there to have some outside facilitators. We felt like it was important to have a consistent process of folks who did this at each school, so we would know that the process had been consistent. And it would be more of a consensus-based process based on the feedback from the group. And then the working group, the district level working group, would have we would certainly be sharing decisions, but it wouldn't be bound by that process to make all decisions.
Okay, and and I agree with the district level group that it should not have a board member, so I appreciate that you didn't put a board member on that. But we're going to have new board members in November, December, and if there are consensus style decision-making groups in action at the site level, you might want to invite one of the new board members just to observe so that they can see what it looks like at a site level, because you're going to have this start needing to transfer knowledge down and stuff. So that might be one thought.
And then one other answer to your question, Tina, was that we wanted to give the sites plenty of time to get teacher input. And so that's why we pushed that date out till October, because we realized that it might take some sites longer. We guess that sites are going to want to make their decisions sooner rather than later, but we wanted to maximize teacher input.
We have a question over here. Kathy?
Thanks, everyone, for the really good work, and I agree with a lot of Tina's questions. I just have one specific question, and it's in the including changes to the daily instructional schedules. I'm assuming that means within existing times, because we can't have Centaurus all of a sudden decide to add a half an hour to their day and Southern Hills take a half an hour away from their day. It's pretty vague how it's written, but I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same understanding for that one.
If we didn't do that, I think Rob Price would come after me. No, yeah, that's the understanding.
Just clarification, so I think our timeline is designed to give ample time for every middle school to phase this in or implement it. But if a school really feels like they want to move ahead with it, we can invite a couple of the members from, or Allison and Mike to come in and help facilitate staff to reach a consensus. But for example, like I envision that at our school that we'd like to move forward with it and get teachers involved and get voice and come up with a really good plan so that the staff agrees that we can add additional plan time by consensus model at our school and every other school as well. Is that correct? We can move forward with it.
Are you asking you can move forward?
Just clarification that just because we said we're going to phase it in, and we talked even about it could take up to a semester for schools to reach some type of plan that a school could move forward with it as long as it was consensus at that site.
That's my understanding, Mike. I mean, I believe that the dollars will be allocated, and so as soon as a school can come up, follow the process, get to consensus, then they could move towards implementation if that was the kind of the agreed upon at each site.
Okay, we have another question. We also need to come back to David's idea about changing some of the language, but let's do that. And your comment next, and we'll come back.
This relates to that question. I'm a little concerned that if you put only BVEA members, you're not representing everybody at the middle level. However, I'm willing to live with that if you promise, and I request that you at least have 4 to 5, or even, well, not that many, but maybe 3 to 4 teachers of color on that committee, middle level committee.
I would just add one other thing. I understand the idea from BVEA, and was this, David, is this your ask or was this BVEA's ask? I guess as a clarification. But while I have the microphone, I'll share with you my concern is that I think for me it's getting the most, the best members on teams. Right, to Mike's point, not 100% of our teachers are members of BVEA, but I would say that there's Terry, is it like 80%? Right, so maybe a compromise is that the percentage of teachers that are in BVEA would equal the percentage of teachers on that committee, and non-exclude. It most likely be 100%. I just don't. If there's somebody who really cares about this, that really wants to do this, if for whatever reason is not a member of BVEA, I still think that they should have a chance to participate.
Terry.
I would just like to respond to that, Rob, and I understand your thinking, but we have written MOUs in the past that have stipulated that we have BVEA members on them, and I would try to stand firm that we continue that practice, because this is, we do represent all Unit B folks, but this is, BVA has worked really hard to get this MOU done, and I think strongly that we can well represent all Unit B members by having BVA members serve in this role.
Okay, so in the process right now, we're in the process of discussing the addition of David's idea. We have 2 ideas on the table. One is putting the constraint that the 6 middle level educators be BVEA members. And someone else, Mike, said that he would agree with that if there was a large percentage of people of color among those teachers. So that's kind of where we are. That's what we're discussing. So we're just looking for right now, language that would meet the needs of this discussion. So it's okay to keep suggesting ideas. Yeah.
I thought Rob had a third suggestion, which I personally liked, which is you could make it 80% if there's 80%. If the 100% in the building, well, then you don't have an issue. But if somebody really wanted to be on this committee, I don't know why they'd be prevented just because they aren't a member. In fact, it might be a really good recruiting piece for you guys. So that's just where I am. So I thought there was a third option out there, Allison.
The third option?
And I guess the other question is why wasn't this included in the original MOU that we reviewed? Or why is this being brought up now?
So I'll just answer that real quick. I woke up this morning and I said, we should have included something else. And so when I came in this morning, I talked to Terry, and we talked about how this is, I asked her, isn't there other contract language that stipulates that in order to participate on on BVSD committees and representing teachers, that the teachers that are being selected are BVEA members. I would say that any teacher has a choice to join BVEA. They can join and be part of the negotiations process. We're going to be making recommendations to the district. We're going to be making recommendations to the BVEA Negotiations Committee based on the work that's being done. And we feel like it's just really important that we have that consistency within the process.
Right, so
So to clarify, it was you and Terry who decided that this was, I was in the meeting. I know that you brought this up in the meeting, David. I knew that Scott had worked really hard to write this language. We reviewed it over the weekend. To have this as kind of I think that there's a compromise here to be had. And I think the majority of the teachers we engage in these things is certainly our BVEA members. I do think, though, that it shouldn't exclude somebody from solving what is, a problem, right? Like, this is a problem solving. I know that this is important to you, but we agreed mutually that this is important to us as well. And so I'm just thinking about the teachers that are out there that, for whatever reason, might not be able to afford BVEA, whatever their reason might be. I think that there's legitimate reasons why people may support you but not join you. And so I just wouldn't want to eliminate somebody who's doing that, right? In the spirit that we would have the majority of folks as BVEA members.
So I'd like to respond to that, Rob. So David and I didn't make this decision. It wasn't a Terry David. He came in and asked me if I thought that was something that should be added to this MOU. And I said, I think it should be because we have had BVEA members listed on our previous MOUs as committee members. So it was just an opinion I had.
Okay, so we do have something on the table. And this is part of the process, is to go ahead and see if there's any last-minute things we have concerns about, last-minute changes in language. It's okay to do that. Remember, we chose to do this process because we're moving together as a team. And so I would ask, is there a way to modify this proposal so it meets the needs we've all expressed? And I heard the needs were representation from the association, representation by people of color who are teachers, representation by people who aren't in the association but would really like to be part of the problem solving. So those are some of the needs we have expressed. Are there any other needs?
Just to clarify, I'm not saying that we need to have people not in BVEA on this.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying I don't want them to be excluded because they're not members, right? I don't. It very well. Most of the things we do are all members, right? But I just think I wouldn't want them to be excluded, right? Because we're talking about problem solving. We want to get the best minds in the room. Right, to Mike's point, I think that there should at least be a representation of this committee and all committees going forward that represent the diversity of our district. I think that aligns to what we've already agreed to in the preamble and where we're trying to go. But I just wouldn't want people to be excluded because they're not a member, because I think there are legitimate reasons people are not members of BVEA, right? But they do. It's not like they're against BVEA. I don't believe that to be true. I just think, and I just, to be honest with you, I'm very frustrated this came at the last minute.
Yeah, totally get that. And is there a suggestion for language that might meet all those needs that have been discussed? Got suggestion? Nativity?
I was just thinking about what that compromise could be, and could you, if 80% of 80% of our teachers are BVA members, could you just do 80% of 6, which would be 4 or 5, 5 of the 6 be BVA, and that would leave, I don't know, it was just an idea to have representation for someone who may not, for whatever reason, be a BVA member.
Suggestion is 5 of 6.
Right, based on the percentage of BVA members in the district.
Okay, Margaret. We're looking for language to meet the needs that have been discussed here.
So it sounds like the issue is exclusivity, not mandate. So could there be a way to say that it's preferred, but not exclusive, and that one position would be, it's kind of a play on language, but one position would meet the 80%, and then in addition, it's preferred that all the members are BVEA. Because I also wonder in smaller this sidebar, I wonder about smaller buildings that may not have the 100% of all members on BVEA. Does that mean that they have less members? Or if there is somebody who's not a member, I think like a Mesa, right, that may not have enough people, would we exclude them? So
Just
just look.
This is the district committee.
This is the district committee, not the site committee.
Forget I said that.
It's Patty talking next.
Thank you. I just really want to make it clear that we're not trying to exclude anybody. Our FACs and our faculty advisory committees at each building hear concerns from everyone at the building. Okay, but our FACs are run and led by BVEA members. There is a choice to be a member or not a member. We're not one of those states that makes everyone be a member, right? And we do feel really strongly, because we do represent everything we've discussed here for our contract language affects every single Unit B employee, that the people that go in, do the work day in and day out, represent our members, our ARs. We're the ones that are committed to that work. I'm not saying that people that are not members are not committed, but they do have a choice to belong to an association that represents everybody. So, it's not a Terry and David thing. We've discussed this and everything. Every single committee through an MOU that's done through our contract language has always been represented by BVEA members. And like I said, we're not excluding anyone's voice. They can go to the member, they can go to the AR, they can go to a committee and express what their feelings are about something. We've never excluded anyone from their voice. But we do feel strongly, and we've had many, many discussions, and I have to tell you, we worked very successfully with HR department, with Katie Mills as well, that, these are members, because we have the majority that do represent, BVEA. And I just want to make it super clear that we're not excluding anyone, but it's just part of being, you have certain rights, you have certain privileges being a member of BVEA. And I just really want to make that clear. And anyone that's out there listening that wants to join, our doors are always open for you, and our doors are always open. We have helped countless Unit B employees that are not members. And they have called us, and we've never we never said, because you're not a member, we're not going to help you. And that, yes, has turned us into the person really valuing what it means to be a member of BVEA. But past practice has always been that any MOU, any committee that started is BVEA members. So putting an exclusion of 80% or a number,
I don't think it's something personally, and I think our BVA members in the room would be able to agree to.
Lisa?
Thank you. I think I'm also struggling to understand why this would be needed, and it would help me to understand maybe with this 12-member group how the folks will be selected, and also whether we have past experience from similar groups that suggest how many applicants we anticipate for the spots.
So we usually have an application process. Just for any of the committees that we have for BVA, we have an application process. And people that are interested will fill out that form and say why they would be interested in serving, because we have to be very clear what the commitment is. Whoever serves in this committee, which is potentially can go up to 3 years, has to have the understanding of what that commitment is. So just like we do our negotiations team, just like we're going to hopefully start with our Teachers Advisory Committee, any committee that we have through BVEA, we had our Task Force 2+, all that has always been done by submitting your request, and then we take it from there as far as how it gets decided.
Okay, sorry, so it's BVEA that would be selecting the educators for the committee?
That is our intent, yes.
If that's the case, I think maybe that underscores my confusion about why having an additional step of membership would be needed if BVEA is also making the selection of the folks who will be included.
A question?
I don't know that it's a question.
Okay.
I'm just saying I'm not sure why we need an additional point in the contract if BVA is also selecting the folks who will be on the committee. I'm not sure why we additionally need contract language that only BVA folks could apply to be selected by BVA.
Because they have control over the committee makeup.
Correct.
So, Patty, would you want to suggest, does anyone want to suggest some language that meets the needs of that we've expressed so far in the group?
So what, I'm sorry.
To clarify, on the site-based meetings, anyone can participate in those, correct? And is it likely that people from those groups would be wanting to go to the district committee because they've participated in the consensus style at the site level?
Sometimes.
And I'm done.
So like I said, we have a process. In BVEA, every time there's a committee, and I can use the example of the task force that was created, the 2+ task force, there was a form that people had to fill out and their interests and so forth. So we do that for like the negotiations committee. We do that for any committee that we have. There is a process we follow. It's not like at random, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. People need to be interested in serving in that committee because we delineate what the commitment is, we delineate what the work is. I can also go back to the extra pay, extra duty task force. And, we've had countless task force through MOUs, and because it's being done through this process, that's how we have always dealt with it. So I'm suggesting there is no change. We don't need to specify, David, that is BVA because BVA is going through that process. And maybe that's what something that had to be clarified before. There's always an application process, people that are interested. And I know there are countless middle school teachers out there that we've had conversations with that are super interested in being part of this process. And that's how we have always done the process, and that's how we expect to continue having that process. We did clarify because pre-K through 8th grade has also middle school, but their vision, they run things totally different. And we have a pre-K 8 teacher here, representation. We have one in our exec board because we want to make sure that everyone is included. And those members will have conversations with their middle school colleagues in order to, we have a process of information and how we distribute all this information. So in my opinion, to answer your question, Allison, there is no need to clarify anything because this is a BVEA process that we always follow.
And when you follow that process, do you also take into account people of color on the committees and other types of balancing of experience, new teachers, experienced teachers? Do you do all that type of balancing?
We always do. We always do. And I will give you a perfect example. I'll go back to the task force, the 2+. It's exactly what we did. We went through a process. We said, we have all these teachers interested, but who's represented? The teachers of color, is one of our priorities. We have made that commitment through our preamble. We're making that commitment through an MOU. BVA is making that commitment through a committee we have started. And as a teacher of color, I can tell you that will be our priority moving forward. So specifying that in an MOU is almost like going against our own contract language, starting with our preamble.
You asked my question. She answered it. Thanks.
Any more questions, clarifications, and then I'll test what we have so far.
I'd like to say something.
Go ahead.
Instead of adding that they're BVEA members, perhaps where it says the working group shall be composed of 12 members, but may be expanded as needed, the group shall be composed of the following members based on an application process so that people know how they're going to be on this committee. And if we have to say based on an application process approved by BVEA and BVSD, however it is that we change that language, I think it is clarifying to know, those of us who are really active in BVEA know that there is an application process for these things that we go through, but not everybody knows that. So I think it would be worthwhile to clarify that maybe.
And just to be clear, this is not language we had ever clarified in any other MOUs to Mike or my knowledge, or our knowledge. So please understand my reaction. Again, we've been working on this. I spent 7 hours with the group. The group, the BVA, wrote the MOU for us to approve, and for this to come at the 11th hour, we've never needed to do this before, right? I just don't understand why.
So with the understanding that BVEA has handled their membership in cooperation with the district, is there any disagreement to going forward with the current proposal the way it's worded? On written here. Is there any disagreement, given all the context that has come out, with going forward the way it is?
I don't disagree. I just wanted to respond to Dr. Anderson. First off, I'm very sorry that this got placed in after you'd had a chance to look at the agreement. And we didn't mean to drop a bomb on you or anything like that. That was not our intent. Our intent was transparency, that this is how we envision going forward what it would look like. And I think to Lisa's point, if BVA is running the application process, then we can oversee who is on there. But we wanted to make sure that that was clear and transparent. And frankly, it is, a stated goal of BVA many times that we want people participating in district level committees in coordination with BVEA efforts to be BVEA members. And so it was not to try to sneak anything in it. On the contrary, it was to try to just be transparent in what we're all about. So I hope that, and I also feel like I tried to answer your question about why we would want that, and I hope that you heard, that we want that consistency in the process.
All right, so I want you to think about whether you have any disagreement to going forward with how it's written, because I'm going to ask that question again, but I just want to say that that's what this process does, is it answers all these questions. We get a chance to talk about it, find out how people feel. This means it deepens our understanding and it deepens our relationships. To have emotion, to be surprised, to be emphatic, and still stay in the room together as one team, because we have to be one team to meet the needs of our kids. So that it's taken us an extra few minutes to discuss this will pay dividends into the future. It will, we understand each other better going through these processes. So now I'm going to ask, is there any disagreement, knowing the context that has been discussed, is there any disagreement with moving forward with this particular issue as it is written right now? Congratulations, I think you have a TA. So let's give ourselves a hand. And bring it, copies that we signed to the table, and we're going to sign those right now. The folks who worked on the middle level planning, come on to the center.
Do we have everybody, or are we
We
going
need everybody that worked on this one to come to the center, and we're missing David, and he worked really hard, even this morning.
Should we wait?
Yeah, let's wait a second. I told him to only take take breaks a little bit at a time, but it looks like we had.
Maybe we need to go ahead and take a 5 and they can pick up some food after this.
Yeah.
He has no idea we're waiting.
No, you go ahead and get started. He'll come in.
All right, I'd like to thank this group, including David, who will hear that we thanked him, for the extra time that you put in. As I heard from our superintendent, you guys worked really hard last Monday on what appeared to be, when we left, a pretty thorny, complicated issue. So good problem solving, good consensus building, and I just want to say thank you to all of you for all the hard work that you did.
Nope, keep going. Keep going.
Okay, so the next issue that we're going to address, Mike, go ahead.
I suggest we take a little break. There's food up here at the table. Please dig in, and let's take 10 minutes or so.
Let's take 10 minutes. That sounds good. Mike said that, and I overruled him, but he was right.
So when you come back, we're gonna do the MTSS Special Education MOU. So you can find that, look at it, decide who's presenting, and we'll get started there. Okay, we'd like to get started. If we could find our way to our chairs. We have the group presenting, working out some last-minute details. Which one?
Okay, everybody who's not in a small group, I just want to point out that and it's okay if you're not in the room yet. So the one other beauty of this process is you do get to discuss this in depth in a work group, and that way we don't have to solve everything as a group of 30. But this group is still working on some language, and then once they're aligned, then that helps the rest of us trust the process that they went through. So we're going to give them a few more minutes while they come to consensus over a couple of words. All right.
Okay, so the next issue will be special education workload/caseload, and who will be presenting this issue? Nancy will. Nancy, you want to choose a responder? Did you say Bill? Yes. Okay, so you're the responder for special education workload caseloads. You want to choose a backup? Who'd you say? Tanya. Okay, great. So turning it back to Nancy, tell us about this proposed language.
Okay, so this is page 6 in your packet that you got this morning. And I'll tell you now that we are already changing some wording. Our small group got back together and used the consensus model, and we have changed some wording in this. When we get there, I'll tell you that there's a change. And again, let me remind you that strikeouts are current contract language. Anything that is bolded and underlined is an addition to contract language. So this is in section C18, assignment of specialists, and C18.1, special education. If a special education employee believes and/or has evidence that the size and/or composition of his/her/their caseload is not consistent with sound and safe educational practices, he/she/they will request a meeting with the building principal and/or a designated special ed director to review the situation. This is a change. When requested, the building administrator and/or designated special ed director shall, instead of will, shall convene a meeting within 10 working days. The review will consist of consultation and collaboration between the special ed employee and the building administrator and/or special ed director to find a timely solution. Possible solutions could include compensation for additional workload, paraprofessional support to address increased student needs, release time for additional special ed paperwork, additional planning time for progress monitoring, hired assistance for specialists and/or an increase in FTE to cover the additional caseload. These solutions are not exhaustive of other mutually agreed upon means to address caseload. If a mutually agreed upon solution is not reached by the building administrator and/or designated special ed director within 5 working days following the meeting, a request for assistance can be made to BVEA and HRD. The district will make every reasonable effort to meet the following IEP special ed caseload guidelines. Mark off the word S, and we are including guidelines, and then a period. And then if you look on down through there, I have to turn my page. We have all of the language that has currently been in the caseload or in the contract, with the exception of psychosocial workers, which is 1 to 50, and that's never been met anyway. So ILC autism, multi-autism is 1 to 10 for all levels. We've crossed out for caseload review numbers. We've added BCBAs, 1 to 3 ILC classrooms,
We have added ECSE with an asterisk, and that asterisk is BVSD ECSE model consists of 1/3 of the Colorado paid folks, 1/3 IEP and 1/3 tuition, inclusive of 1 to 5 students with IEPs per school, AM or PM session, with a cap of 1 to 7 inclusive of mid-year eligibility. Then we have ECSE ILC 1 to 10, 1 to 5 in the morning and 1 to 5 in the afternoon. And C25 special ed staff will not be required to head up 504 teams or manage 504 accommodations for non-special education students. Special education staff will not be required to maintain MTSS plans or read plans, but are welcome to collaborate with the general educator. MTSS is a general education responsibility and initiative, but oftentimes specialists can be experts in offering interventions. School psychologists and social workers will serve as the bridge between MTSS and special education through process collaboration and consultation with the MTSS team.
Okay, thank you. Bill, share with us what you heard, how you feel about it, and your own perception of this issue.
I heard what's written with a couple of edits with shall instead of will up in the first couple of lines there, and then caseload guidelines in the second paragraph. I think everything else was the same. What was the questions again?
Oh, just, how do you feel about this language, and what are your own perceptions of the issue?
The description of the early childhood model, the idea that it's the model but is not the the reality. We can't make people come to a tuition program, and this has the potential of changing with regards to legislative changes that are currently in process, even though that's a couple of years out at least. So I guess with some understanding that changes may need to be made depending on how the early childhood in the state of Colorado changes with different statute changes. The one question, so I'm assuming a special ed student could have a read plan. Is this saying that the SPED staff wouldn't manage the read plan for a SPED student?
Nancy, you want to go ahead and respond?
Many times special education students do have read plans, or students with special needs have read plans. The IEP is the special ed caseload manager's responsibility. The read plan is not. The read plan is a general education initiative, however we want to term that. And the read plan then would be taken care of through general education, however, in consultation with the special ed teacher, if need be.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense that MTS, like the whole point of MTSS is that it's like pre-SPED or whatever, but the read plan is, yes, that's just help clarifying. Thanks. That's it, I guess.
Okay, thanks. Tanya, what would you like to add? How do you feel about the language, and what is your own perception of this issue?
I think the language changes are really good. I think it's great to have a clear process in the building of, what should be followed when a caseload review needs to happen. I'm a little bit unclear on the ECSE. Is it saying that 1 to 7 is the maximum for a preschool teacher that has both an AM and a PM classroom, so a full-time teacher would have a maximum of 7 students or 7 per section?
It would be per session.
Okay.
And oftentimes mid-year, students show, ECSE can show up at any time throughout the school year. And that would be a 1 to 7. And it was explained to us also that, and we fully agree and believe this, that the district does everything they can to place not 7 difficult students in one program, but to try to spread them out. But we agreed that 7 is, I mean, that's enough. If you have a really difficult caseload, 7 students would be almost too much to handle.
I don't have any other
That's
questions.
it? Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to open it up to some general questions, and I see a couple of hands down there.
This isn't a question, this is a point of clarity. So, Bill, I completely hear what you're saying. Like, there might not be tuition for students at preschool age if our government does preschool. So we might say 1/3. What would be another word we could use that implies students without CPP or IEPs? So the difference is students on the Colorado preschool projects are students who get preschool services for free because they have several risks, two or more several risk factors, including maybe they're learning second languages, maybe it's socioeconomic, maybe it's change of residence. There's a number of factors, but those are students who we would consider MTSS, typically at the school age. So the idea is we will not have an inclusive setting without the 1/3 tuition. I don't know what's a better word. We could say non-identified.
So we can't make students come to preschool. So our ability to get students that are non-special ed or non-CPP eligible is limited, right? So it's not compulsory, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, it's fine. It's just, that's our current model. Who knows if the model might change because laws change or funding changes or there's more ability for parents to make choices about private preschool programs. If all of a sudden funding through Proposition EE provides reimbursements or whatever it is for private preschools, we may struggle to get folks to participate in our preschool program. That's the and we would have no recourse around how to do that.
I think this is the model as we intend it to be at this time. And yeah, if we go over 1 to 7 for a classroom of 16, which is the state limit for childcare laws, we have changed the LRE, the least restrictive environment, for our youngest children. So that's, even 1 to 7 is quite a stretch. I work at Mapleton Early Childhood Center, and it's, these teachers work hard. So, and Tanya, what it is there's an AM session and a PM session. So this is for each session. That would be the numbers. And it was a stretch for the teachers they really had requested 1 to 6. So if we want to keep the word tuition until it doesn't apply, maybe we'll clean it up at another contract review.
Okay, so Carly, you're not recommending any changes in the language right now, but through this conversation, we have an understanding of the intent and a willingness to, as laws change around this issue, we will make adjustments, or you're willing to make adjustments.
Well, Bill brought it up, so I just
Right.
wanted to, if that feels good to everybody, I think leaving the language as is our best effort right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, my worst fear is that all non-special ed students go to private preschools, and we have to educate only SPED students. And like that's just the potential of what could happen depending on how this stuff plays out. But I mean, like right now, exactly, it is what our model
Yeah.
is, and we make all efforts to make that. But I have some real concerns with how the state is looking to change early childhood education, but that's a whole separate banana.
I hear that, Bill. I just want to share a best hope that people wake up to having a master's educated teacher in the classroom with a paraprofessional, a master's plus speech and language person, an OT, and a school psych or social worker. They're going to go, bingo, and they're coming to the best program. And that's our BVSD early childhood.
Okay, so Judy had a question.
So mine is a clarification for the community, if they're listening, and for folks here, that the statement that MTSS is pre-special education, MTSS is not pre-special. I just want to clarify that as a pre-K one, I teach kindergarten, first, and second grade, and I have many students that have Tier 2 instruction, which is part of our multi-tiered systems of support, and they don't then move on to special education. They are students who need an extra level of support in either reading, social, emotional. It's handled by the classroom teacher, and many of those students never go on to never go on to have an IEP. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Thank you.
Okay, Lisa?
Tina.
Oh, Tina, I'm sorry.
Okay. That's all right. It's the mask. On page 6 at the bottom of the large paragraph, it says that a request for assistance can be made to BVEA and HRD. Do you have to request to both? And if you're a non-union member, do you request to BVEA anyway, or should it read and or HRD?
Tina, I would say that we hope we don't get to that point, honestly, that the process is laid out very clearly above, that you would go to your building administrator or your special ed director and request a meeting, and a meeting will be held. And then, quite honestly, in my 20-plus years, I can't think of a time when it's gotten to BVEA and HRD to fix something like this.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify the process to see if you go to both or one or the other.
You could go to either. You could go to, typically you would go to HRD.
Okay.
If you're a BVEA member, you would have representation with you as a BVEA member. If you're not, you would go to Human Resources on your own.
Okay. So then, okay, so because this is language that's in our contract for every employee, correct?
It does represent all Unit B employees,
Right,
correct?
okay. We might want to put and or so that people understand, but.
And I'm happy with doing that. Does
Is there
anybody else
any
have any?
disagreement with adding the words and or? Sure.
Just a point of clarification. So I mentioned it before that many times we help non-members with situations, and this might be one of them. We do meet with the HR department, Melissa and Mike, on a weekly basis. We have a standing meeting, and usually at those meetings is where many things we're working on, members or non-members sometimes, we will be asked by HR, or if there's a member is not a member, they check with us. But many a times we've had conversations where we do support our Unit B employees that are not members. And this would be one of those cases. And it's always, we always, the non-member will usually call us directly, to tell you the truth. We've had many of those occasions that Terry and I have worked with before. So it's just part of the process, right, of these weekly meetings and things that come up. And we would always ask the person if they want representation. So I just always want to make that clear that we're always open to that. Of course, we want every single Unit B to be a member of BVEA. But it's just the process that we honor.
No, that's great. No, and I just wanted to make it clear that people didn't have to go to BVA, that they can just go straight to HRD. That's, yeah, okay.
Okay, and so Patty, you're okay with the and/or?
I am okay with that, but
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that everyone heard that as well, because we
Right.
do meet on a weekly basis.
Right.
And then
Okay.
I had a question about read plans. Do we continue read plans in middle school and high school? So who owns those? Is it like a language arts teacher? Because I just don't even know, so I thought I'd ask, like who?
It could be a language arts teacher, it could be a literacy specialist. It depends on what staff you have in your building, actually.
Okay.
Yes, sir. It's a language arts teacher, but in consultation with the MTSS team. Usually, I think that's the way that works.
Nope.
And then just my last comment for anyone who's watching, when we talk about changes that might come up, we have a mechanism in this contract to open it before 3 years. And just a reminder to all of us, if something that's going really badly, we can open up the contract and address that issue. So if we are feeling uncomfortable, and I sometimes think we should, so it doesn't seem like it's a big deal, that, it's just another way of coming together and helping address a problem that we have in the best interest of our students. So just because we don't do it today doesn't mean we can't do it next year, that we have to wait for 3 years. We can do it before.
Okay, thank you. So, Melissa.
I just also wanted to add that this is the process that we already follow. And so the language is just explaining what we do. And the caseloads with BCBA's ECSE and ECSE ILC, we didn't make those up. Those are the ratios that special ed uses. So this is just an articulation of the current process.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask Kathleen, thank you.
I just want to respond to what Bill said and make sure that our small group here is all on board with us, because I do think that this language that is the asterisk around ECE, I feel like the description of the model was intended to explain why those numbers are different than other numbers, but I'm responding to Bill's concern that by putting it there, we create potential issues for ourselves if the state law changes, or we're not exactly a third. And I know from working with those programs pretty frequently, we're moving those numbers around. We're not always at a third, and I'm concerned that having that language in creates an ambiguity. So I think it's a legitimate issue. And I'm wondering if that asterisk, if we need to cut the language between model and then the 1 to 5. I don't think it changes what we are trying to do there. I think it actually just clarifies. And I'm going to say it, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be ever invited back to consensus. But I do not know how CAP is still in there around ECSE when we specifically declined to use that for every other group. I don't think that our intent as a small group was to make 1 to 7 a CAP and everything else a guideline. So I want to get clear on that.
So the clarity is, so I think it's important for people to understand, early childhood special educators wear 2 caps. They are special educators who do case management for students with IEPs. And they are general educators, so they run the whole classroom for all the students as well. So they wear 2 caps. So the point about putting in the model was to have a balance in what their expectation is. So we could put the ideal model, suggested model. We can do these things. But if we take away CAP, we are breaking LRE. So the CAP is relative. We had 16 students down there, but we took that out because we did. We could put that back in because that is the state guideline. which makes 7 students what needs to happen to have the least restrictive educational environment. So the cap for early childhood educators is a cap. In that case, that's why it's kind of pulled aside, because it's unique.
And if there's one area I feel comfortable in this world, it's special ed law.
Yeah.
And LRE is not a collective bargaining decision. It's an individual kid IEP decision. And if the individual IEPs in a classroom make it such that that ratio shifts lower, then they do. We don't need language in a collective bargaining agreement to do it because that's federal law. So I think codifying into a contract what we know exists in federal and state law is problematic, because then we're waiting 3 years if the preschool ratios change. So I understand the language is here to convey that ECSE is different. I get that. But I think it's very problematic if we try and put in this third, and I don't think our small group intended to cap ECSE and nobody else. I think our intent was to use language that said, these are the ratios we're talking about, and if it's outside of that, or otherwise there's an issue with the sound and safe practices, that there's a review process that's clear and it happens.
So am I on? Yeah. So I'm gonna ask the parties to take your concerns and think about some language that you might recommend that would address your concerns, so we can respond to that in just a minute. But before you do that, I'm gonna ask, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Terry, but I believe there's language in the contract that if something in the contract is contrary to state law or federal law, that it's addressed, no matter whenever that changes. And I would also, how about adding, though, that you have a leadership team that meets on a regular basis with the district, that if things happen that are not in alignment with the contract for whatever reason, they're addressed, so that some of these concerns about entering into a 3-year agreement have an avenue to be addressed as circumstances change with regards to the laws that guide these. But I guess my question then, is that correct, Terry?
We have our LMT group that just got
Oops, okay.
Yes, there is contract language about our labor management team that meets, and we typically, in a non-pandemic, non-negotiation year, meet once a month to address issues such as that, or we could.
Okay, so we still probably need language potentially, and I'm just going to turn it back over to...
Yeah, I think you missed the point of what I was saying about the preschool model. The preschool model language that's here explains why there's a lower ratio, but it codifies something that is a really complex web of federal and state regulations and rules, and it's not necessary to the content.
So your recommendation is to remove that language?
That's right.
Okay. So we're looking at removing the language that was just read, and is there anybody that would like to...
We're not looking at removing all of it. I'm happy to read it. So if you're looking at the asterisks and the parentheses on page 7, below where it says ECSE ILC, it would read BVSD ECSE. 1 to 5 students with IEPs per preschool AM or PM session, with 1 to 7 inclusive of mid-year eligibility.
And so your proposal is to do what with that language?
To make it read exactly like I just said.
Okay, just like you said, okay.
Yep.
Great. Okay, so responding to this change, not to the full language, is there any disagreement with accepting this proposed language change and moving on to looking at the entire language of this issue at this point? Any disagreement with moving forward to the entire agreement, making this modification? Okay, seeing none, we've adopted that change to the language, and now we're back to the full language that has been presented. Are there any further questions, concerns, comments about this particular MOU? Okay, seeing none, I believe we've adopted this MOU regarding special education caseloads. So if we could have the respective parties move to bring. Oh, it's not an MOU. Okay, contract language. I misspoke. I can't see those over there. So we've adopted this language. If the respective parties that are signing off on this language would like to come to the table, and just kind of right behind them, the people that served on this task force, if you would like to move to the center, please, and we can all stand up for a minute and stretch our legs. You want to? Yeah, pick.
Angevine wants to book with us.
Okay. Okay, do we have all of the team members? It looks like we do. Mike is going to honor this group for us.
Wow, what an accomplishment. A lot of hard work, another complicated issue, and congratulations on coming up with a workable plan. Thank you.
Okay, we're making a little change up. I'd like to try to do the MOU on assessment next. Yeah, I picked it because it's my turn. So you're going to present, Margaret? No. Who's presenting? Okay, that's even easier. You're giving it to someone else. Okay. I got it. Okay, before you get started, Margaret, we're going to ask to have you pick a responder, so somebody that can tell you once they hear what you have to say, how they feel about what you said, and does it meet the needs for our best possible outcomes?
Judy, you were on assessment, so not you. Okay. James.
James will be your responder. James, who would be your backup?
We don't have the language.
Oh. Here you go. This is a brand new copy for you. All right. Okay.
We have one of those assessment sheets here.
You don't even have to read it. It's amazing. Did I pick my second? Did somebody pick my second? No. So James is my first, and then who's?
And he
who
picks,
did you pick so I can talk to them?
Mike.
Mike. Okay, thanks, Mike. All right, are you ready for me to start?
for copies. Does everyone have their eyes on this, have their eyes on it? Did you find it? You're good? Okay.
All right, so to begin with, we'll start with the purpose. As you can see there, our goal is to increase collaboration with the district assessment team, which is currently a team of teachers and staff that meet regarding assessments in the district, and to build collaboration between the DILT, which is the District Instructional Leadership Committee, currently meeting around strategic plan, scope and sequence, and other factors, while DILT is developing the Balanced Assessment System, also known as BAS. The second purpose is to develop methods and standards for gathering feedback from teachers as they implement the BAS. So I'll give a quick background. These two committees have met separately. DILT started this year. DAT has been going for a number of years. And we wanted to make sure that the work around in strategic plan and the work moving forward around assessment and the work moving forward around scope and sequence and unit development was aligned so that as the process was being built, we were not at cross paths. So basically, we can read, I'll just read it. We honor the hard work already begun by the members of the DILT and are committed to collaborating with the DILT and the DAT. There was a lot of humor while we were writing this. We recognize the district has made a commitment to developing a BAS that connects instruction with meaningful assessment, which will inform instruction and lead to student growth. The DAT and the DILT are committed to working collaboratively to implement the BVSD BAS and to gather information about its effectiveness and to provide feedback on its sustainability as it is implemented. The following BVSD assessment principles outline these DAT purposes of statement, and you can see those are listed there, the 4 bullets. We will gather data over the next year around the implementation of these assessments and the impacts they have on student learning outcomes. As we gather data, we will look for episodes where teacher voice was included. The district is committed to having the DAT and the DILT meet at least 2 times a year to share progress with the BAS and to gather feedback from teachers. And then we listed possible questions. And this MOU is at will and may be modified by mutual consent of authorized officials from BVEA and BVSD. The MOU shall become effective upon signature by the authorized officials from BVEA and BVSD and will remain in effect until modified or terminated by either of the partners by mutual consent. This MOU will be revisited in 1 year, spring 2022, and status determined. And I think, thanks, Patty. And I think the only thing that I want to add before I stop talking is that we really are committed through the strategic plan and through the work of assessment and scope and sequence to work together so that what we're impacting our students and our teachers around really helps to move growth and achievement for students. So I just want to say it was a great committee and we got a lot of work done, and now I'm done talking.
Hold on. Yep. The questions for you are, sorry, there it is. Okay. All right. So how do you feel about what you heard? Do you feel this language addresses the issue, meets the needs of all affected parties, and helps facilitate our best possible outcomes? And do you have any questions or clarifications?
So I feel really good about what I just heard because there's a lot of collaboration going on with a lot of strategic work and assessment and DILT and DAT and SAC and MTSS. And so all of our acronyms really are aligned and are working to be aligned. But what makes me feel good about it is as we roll out, assessment, scope and sequence, the strategic plan, they're all working in parallel, so to make sure that one doesn't come before the other. They're all aligned. People understand that one is supporting the other, and that's how you build a sustainable process. So do I think it, what was the other question? Do I think it supports?
It's the needs of all affected parties.
I think so. I think that, again, going back to what the goal was that Dr. Crespo said was collaboration, and they kept collaboration at the forefront, and it sounds like that process is being worked through, so good job.
All right, Mike.
Yeah, I would just add that the overarching purpose is that down the line, we're going to see increased student achievement if all these things are aligned, and we're conscientious about having the DILT and the DAT working together. So, good process. I feel really good about it. I think it's going to be, it's really going to promote the overall strategic plan.
James is going to add something, and then we'll go to Patty.
I did have one question, and I don't know if it was addressed, but timeline, did it have timelines for all of this work?
Anybody else can jump in too, but it's a year process. We'll meet multiple times. The committees will meet multiple times to make sure they're getting updated and feedback to answer those questions, and then we'll revisit in the spring.
So I just wanted to clarify for our community that might be listening. So as Margaret said, the district assessment team is a committee that has met through the years and always, I know Terry is part of that as president of BVA, as part of assessments throughout the district. The DILT, the District Instructional Leadership Team, is every single school's principal and either one or two teachers from their school are part of that. So every single school is represented. And it just depends on the number of teachers that are in the building. So some schools have two. And so I just wanted to make that clear that every single school is represented in DILT.
Thank you for those clarifications. Very helpful. Opening up to the general group here. Are there any more questions or clarifications at this time? Is there any disagreement with moving forward with this proposal as it is right now? All right, congratulations, everybody. Let's give a hand. And bring the papers to the front here. We'll sign off on those, and then right behind those folks that are signing, let's have the whole committee that worked on this come to the center. You want to honor these guys? I would love to honor them. Thanks for hanging out in the center. Okay. Just a second, Chris. Oh, you're on the other one. Oh, we love you. Okay, Chris, go ahead.
You know, it looks like this group could easily give like a cheer, which means obviously when you put collaboration and a bunch of like initials together, it must equal a good time. But that set aside, thank you for the work that you did. Thank you for doing something that I think that this process is all about, which is collaboration. Because as we put teachers in the district together, especially in a really complicated landscape that changes all the time with assessment, it's critical that we collaborate and talk to each other. So I thank you for all that work, and I know success will come because of it.
Okay, so upon request, we're going to do the MOU regarding special education. And I'm looking for that. It must be in the original packet, right?
This is in the new packet.
Oh, new packet, okay.
New packet, page 4, you said?
4.
Okay.
Borrow this one. All right, and who will be presenting this? Nativity? Okay, so we have 2 presenters. Somebody want to pick a responder?
Do I pick a responder? Okay. Kathy. Yeah.
Okay, and would you like choose a backup?
Mike.
Okay, Mike.
You're the second backup. I'll bring it to you.
Okay, so Carla and Nativity are going to present the MOU on bridging the gap of MTSS to special education. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to start with the purpose, and then Carla will do the explanation. The purpose, we believe that there needs to be a bridge between the resources in special education and the implementation of an effective multi-tiered systems of support. Current FTE assignments for school psychs and school social workers have not been aligned with our bargain agreement, which stated 1 to 50. The purpose of this MOU is to define FTE allocations for school psychologists and social workers according to school size, which will serve to bridge the coordination and implementation of effective MTSS systems across the district.
Okay, so an explanation, just back to the purpose, school psychologists and social workers have been given FTE allocation based on school size for as long as I can remember. So this addresses some of the glitches, but more importantly, I think it's very proactive, and this is why. This MOU is based on the ideal standards from the practice model of the National Association of School Psychologists, which I might add was developed by Andrea Klein, school psychologist at Louisville Middle School, and the framework for equity and excellence that we have in Boulder Valley School District. School psychologists and social workers will bridge the systems and structures of MTSS, both academically and behaviorally across all tiers of support. And then we quote from the practice model, "The comprehensive implementation of school psychological services has consistently been shown to support teachers' ability to teach and students' ability to learn, and it's a cost-effective investment in the success of all students." Okay, so for the purpose of bridging MTSS and special education, we recommend that school psychologists and social worker allocations be based on school size formulas. I remind you that we already do that, but this is putting a clearer model to that. We believe that a tiered approach should be used, that we're going to do this over 3 years, which is why it's an MOU. And the team believed that starting at high school was a good place to start because we know the achievement gaps are consistent in high school. We know that social emotional concerns raise in high school. We know that we have this brief period of time to support our students to graduate, to feel their best, to take care of their mental health, to engage their learning. So this is what we're hoping is for this school year that we will address high school FTE And so we came up with a formula. It is based on the NAS practice model. It is not, however, at the ideal standard of the practice model because we understand there's a budget and we want to work together. So what we're hoping is high schools that are 1,800 and over would have a 2.0, for example, 1,200 to 1,799, a 1.2 FTE, and then you can see on there how it changes. No schools will have a reduction. There are some schools that are very small. They will not have a reduction in FTE. Schools, though, that have an enrollment of 1,000 students or more and that are in the targeted range of support on our framework for equity and excellence will have an additional 0.5 FTE. This aligns the FTE more closely to the NAS practice model. The opportunity in doing that is to not wait for students to be identified in special education, to be disproportionately identified as disabled because they are students with cultural or linguistic differences or students of color. It's the opportunity to do the prevention work. So we're going to want to get on the upfront, and this is really exciting. We thought schools with an enrollment of 300 or below in the targeted range will have an additional 0.2 FTE. So for this next year, we're asking for a combined 2.4 FTE to be spread over the schools. Not all of schools will have a change, but the majority do, a small change. For this next school year, and sometime in January, I suppose, middle school and elementary school will be looked at because those are also critical places to do the prevention work. Its estimated cost for the 2.4 is $299. Of course, that's estimated. There's a range. And yeah, there you go. Any questions?
Okay, we'll get to that in just a minute. So Kathy, how do you feel about what you heard? Do you feel the language addresses the issue and meets the needs of the affected parties? And what questions do you have?
So the first question's,
how do you feel about what you heard?
I feel good about what I've heard. I appreciate that we didn't go for what the national standard might be, that we tried to solve a problem within our budgetary constraints, so I thought that was encouraging to hear. It makes sense to me to start at the high school level, I think. I don't understand the part where you said we're already doing some of this, so I don't know how much this is a change from current practice, but I get the sense from listening to you that it helps our current practice, and so I think that's a good start. It doesn't address moving on to middle and elementary, but I understand we will all work in good faith to make sure we can do that once we've adopted this part of the MOU. So I feel good about it. My other question is it just up to the building principal then to decide how to, for like example, the 1,800, whether it's 2 social workers or 2 psychologists or 1 each? I'm not sure how that's going to be decided and how that's going to be allocated. So I just had a question about that because I think their work is very different, psychologists and social workers. If I could wave a magic wand sitting next to the budget guy, I would have social workers in a lot more prevalence in all our schools, but I know we can't do that. So I'm just curious how that decision's going to be made as to how you divide up the social worker and psychologist. But I'm excited about MTSS. I think it's a good model, and I know we have a long way to go to implement it to its fullest potential, but it feels like this is a good start.
Carla, would you like to address the questions?
Yes. Well, first on page 4, the last paragraph at the end, it says a tiered approach will be used to implement recommendations at high schools in the 21-22 school year and elementary and middle schools in the 22-23 school year. I guess that's the promise that, yes, we're going to look at this, right? Does that feel like that's sufficient to you? Okay, great. And yes, so we are not at the standard. So the way psychologists and social workers work right now is we are one collective employee group. Our roles are very, very similar, with the difference being that school psychologists we are highly trained on instructional practice as well as diagnostic assessment for students who may or may not have learning disabilities, ADHD, other things like that. So the way it works is when there's an opening, principals and special ed directors and psychologists and social workers do the interviews. In fact, they're happening as we speak for a couple positions. And together they collectively decide who's the best person to meet the needs of schools and who's ready to join the team, because we get to choose the best, right?
Okay, thank you. So, Mike, your thoughts. How do you feel about the language you heard, and what else would you like to add, and do you have any other questions?
Just one question. I guess the duration of this MOU actually does not have an end. It goes all the way through till we hit the middle and the elementary, correct?
Could you repeat that? You say it doesn't have an end, and then I couldn't hear the
Well, the
rest.
duration of the MOU it starts as it's signed. That's when it begins, but it doesn't have a duration of the end. I think it's terminated by mutual consent by both parties. But I think what you're doing is you're going 21, 22, 22, 23. So this could be 2 years, correct?
I suppose it could be. So it sounds like you're saying we need better language on here to identify the duration.
No, I guess I'm just trying to get it clarified just so I understand it. If it's 2 years or 1 year or.
I think our intention was, like most MOUs, they go 3 years. And the idea is as we tier this in, we're collecting data and to see how effective it is and to have some flexibility in shifting the assignments that
Okay.
way. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. I guess the other question is for the 21-22 school year, we're looking at 2.4 FTE for the start at the high school level, which is estimated around 300,000. So then the following year, we could increase at the middle or middle and elementary, right? But we don't know what that cost estimate is.
Right. So when we did the numbers first, starting with elementary, and they're not as far off as the high schools were. They're much closer. So I think it's not, what I looked at, for example, if we were to use this model for middle school, it's less than a 2.0 FTE. If we were to agree that that was the plan moving forward, I think we have to stay within the framework of excellence and see, well, does this make sense for that school?
Okay. And I think Kathy covered it pretty well in terms of the context of this MOU. And in particular, I think the NASP, following the NASP is a good thing.
Okay, so we're okay with the duration issue?
Yes.
Okay.
Quick question. Were high school principals engaged on this in regards to how they felt like this would help solve this issue?
No, but we have a high school principal here. What do you think?
Is there a reason that we didn't do that, or?
Rob, I'll address that a little bit while James is getting a microphone over there. I did go back and talk with my high school principal extensively about this, and he was quite excited, actually, and is anxious to have something a little more concrete about how to engage with MTSS and a way to have some good strategies and structures put in place for MTSS. So I can tell you that at least one high school principal that I spoke with, because I worked there, was excited about this.
So James, would you like to share from your perspective?
Sure. So to answer your question, Rob, no, we weren't. However, I would piggyback off of what I'm sure Dan was saying. It is exciting to be able to, have this opportunity, work with MTSS and this group. But yeah, just for the record, it's always nice for us to come together when it, especially when it affects, you know, your school, your level, and have input on there. Just goes back to the whole collaboration piece.
Okay. Any additional, I'm going to open it up, any additional questions?
I'm sorry, I have
Tina.
another question.
Oh, okay,
In the
let's go with
purpose,
Rob.
it says the bargain agreement which states 1 to 50, and that's 50 of what? Is that 50 of students on IEPs?
Hold on, we get you a mic.
The previous language said one psychologist or social worker to 50 students on a caseload, but that's, one, not how we work. We work with the general ed population all the time in terms of suicide and threat assessments. We often are part of the MTS team. We work with a wider range. So it's never really worked. We work with quite a bit more students, but also it's not how we have been assigned. It was the previous language.
But I guess my question would be, who would be, when you say caseload, how do you determine who, you know, given your definition, who's on a caseload and who isn't? What qualifies a student to be part of a caseload?
Right, and I think that was the glitch. So you could say that students on the caseload are students who have direct or indirect hours on their IEP through a psychologist or social worker. However, that's not the way the reality comes out. So the caseload has not been well defined. I mean, you went right to it, Rob, and that's why we've been school size assigned.
So we're switching from caseload to number of students in a school. Have we adjusted the job description and the function? I mean, because what I'm hearing you say sounds like it's a job description issue because school psychologists, school social workers are being asked to work outside of their scope, right, of what the job description is that we hire to. Did we adjust that as well? Because it seems like if you switch from caseload specific to, you know, serving as needs, then there's really no differentiation when you need more wraparound services for schools with higher percentages of those students, with the idea that just, you know, 2 will do. I want to hear the thinking about it. Sounds like we're trying to fix a lot of things. I'm just trying to understand a little bit more depth.
Okay, so who's going to respond to?
Well, I could talk about the job description, which is currently a work in progress over the last 2 or 3 years. As the directors have changed, the job description has changed, but the reality of the work has not changed. And so I think putting some time into a better job description makes sense. I understand there's some restructuring going on that would be part of it. But the practice model is a very clear job description. It has 6 to 8 areas that the school psychologist or social worker would serve the school, both students with and without IEPs, students in special ed, students in general education. It's a pretty nice, clear package.
So I guess before we move on to other questions, is there any need for any language change in the purpose based on Rob's concern? Or does everybody have an understanding of what that
I think
number
it's somewhat
means?
unclear.
Okay.
I do think that there probably needs to be some clarification. I just think we just need to be really clear that, I mean, from what I'm hearing Carla say, that we're moving from a job description that was specified on caseload to a job description which is that school psychologists and social workers are responsible for serving all students at the direction of the principal. Because I'm thinking that's what Dan and James are thinking of, right? With this increased FTE, right? That you would be able to leverage them in ways that may go beyond what their job description may have considered previously. And I wouldn't want our psychologists and social workers to have a different understanding of that. I think that we owe people that clarity if that's what it is that we're agreeing to and saying. And I guess to the extent that we engage psychologists and social workers on this change and kind of approach, I'd love to hear a little bit about that too.
Okay, so Carla, is that the direction that you're headed with this language that was just described?
I hear what you're saying, Rob. I think the idea of having more clarity on the job description makes total sense. The practice model does do that. It is in collaboration with special ed and gen ed. Of course, this is being funded for high school, so the idea would be as psychologists and social workers are funded for this work, that would be the expectation. Does that make sense? Because the 1 to 50 it's really just a number. It doesn't align with our job description or our work.
So
here's what I'm hearing, right? I'm hearing the intent of what we're trying to do is leverage the expertise of psychologists and social workers to provide the needed wraparound support services, right? In addition to the other tasks and roles that psychologists and social workers take on today, which some of those are mandated federally. You know, there's laws that we have to follow, right, to the extent that we have to do evaluations. There's some other things that only like psychologists have the expertise and things to do. I hear the intent, right, and the idea that we would be increasing wraparound supports and services, especially coming out of a pandemic, especially for our high school kids who we all know have been impacted greatly, makes a ton of sense. I just want to make sure that everybody understands this is what we're doing, that principals understand how they're going to use that and leverage that as they're trying to plan on their, the work to support the social, emotional, and academic needs of coming forward. And as we talk about MTSS, certainly behaviorally, but academically, right, that I just think the job this expands the job, and I just want to make sure that everybody knows and understands that that's what this agrees to do. Understanding, Carla, that folks, other duties as assigned is like the small print in every job description that you could have in a school district, right? But we're formalizing something in an agreement. Just want to make sure that everybody knows and understands. I'm a little concerned we didn't talk to high school principals, right? I mean, I think that would have been a great step in this process. But it sounds like, that I don't know that any high school principal would say, oh, give me less resources. I think they'll be excited with more resources. I just want to kind of make sure that we're being clear with everyone as we kind of make this pretty significant. Because it's a significant investment, $300,000, and to this point, I'm unsure of where those dollars are going to be coming from.
So there's another question there. We'll come back to that in a minute, but Margaret was going to add something.
I actually just had the funding question based on how we spend dollars for special education versus general fund dollars and what those implications are for their reporting. That was all.
Okay.
Which I'm sure Bill has handled.
Bill, do you want to add to that? A microphone?
Mike's all migrated that way.
There we go.
Just in comparison to the other investment that we just tentatively agreed, we went through our preliminary budget, decided things we weren't going to spend money on, reallocated that to middle level planning. I do not believe that we have done this for this $300,000 investment, not to my knowledge. So just I want to be really incredibly clear on the differences between this ask and the other ask. Because as I shared with our group, and the preliminary budget, right, everybody has an opportunity to see that. We present that publicly. It's actually really clear recurring one-time dollars. And so I have not asked Bill to look at this. I don't know that anybody else has asked, but I just want to be really clear. The $300,000 this would commit to, we have not went into the budget and repurposed. We could do that after the fact, or we could do that before we approve, but I'll turn it over to Bill.
That's correct. It hasn't been included in the preliminary budget. The one thing that does give me a little bit of heartburn is the statement in here that this will be rolled out to elementary and middle schools in the following year, but there's no included, doesn't necessarily need to be included in this MOU, but the estimation of what that cost is, I always like to have a good idea of sort of the ballpark of what something we're looking at when we're talking about additional supports for the targeted schools. We have a whole separate allocation of resources for targeted schools, so I do kind of wonder how many additional layered targeted support things we need to put in place. We did have that conversation in the middle level planning committee, whatever, last Monday, about whether there needed to be a differentiated allocation based on this model that's been put together for the 3 tiers of support schools. And we landed on the fact that no, this needs to be addressed for everybody, which is why we came up with a straight per pupil amount for those resources, and that there wasn't a need to layer additional supports for that middle level planning time. So I kind of wonder why, why we start picking out other things that needed to be included in that additional layering of support. No, it hasn't been included. What is that sort of ballpark of including elementary and middle, which there are a lot more schools, so small changes across a lot of schools can have a bigger impact. And then the special ed question about funding, can you clarify that a little bit? Or did I take your microphone? Okay.
Okay, so I'm hearing there's an issue yet to be dealt with around funding in the first year, another piece around funding as it gets rolled out to elementary and middle level the following year, and how does that fit with the current differentiated funding for targeted schools? Those seem to be the 3 issues.
Just in contrast, when we talked about the middle level planning, we were very clear in that language that it was not a commitment beyond what we're talking about today. It was a commitment to look at it. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't know how in good faith we could commit to spending a dollar amount of money that we don't know what that is in future year budgets. And we were really clear, and we talked about this for a while in our middle level planning group, this idea that we can make a decision on recurring funds today, but I can't make commitments to further years of recurring funds if those recurring funds aren't there. And then what you have to ask yourself, and I think one of the things that as we evaluate the process that we've gone through this year is this idea that what's the most important priority so we know how to prioritize our budget, right? In this process, we agree upon concerns and they're all weighted equally, right? But is compensation more important than middle level planning, more important than this issue, more important than another? And I think as a reflection on this process, that would be helpful for us and a better alignment to our preliminary and budgeting process, because now we're getting into a place, a lot of people have worked really hard on a good idea, right? And we don't have the numbers worked out, right? We don't want that to be the reason you don't do a good idea, but there's certainly just a misalignment, right? And I think that's just something, an opportunity for improvement.
Kathy, go ahead. And then Tiffany.
I just have a question, Bill. So there's conversation about differentiated funding based on different tiers of needs of the schools, which would pick up, I think, some of the need that's identified here. I don't know how they relate. So this is over and above, or would this, I'm having a hard time making those things fit together if they even do.
This would be over and above outside that additional support. Kathy, this is totally separate.
And so this addresses a different way of handing out funding, because we were going towards a more needs-based funding, and this is more flat-based. And I'm not suggesting that all the schools can't use it. I'm just suggesting it's a different way of looking at it, which is a departure from the direction I thought we were headed in.
Well, I do think it solves a different issue, right? And this is an issue, as Carla, I'm sure, would articulate to you. There's an issue in caseload numbers and expectations for our psychologists and social workers. Right, I said I think that's a problem that the group tried to fix. Right, in this language, it ties that problem to the problem you're speaking to, which is we're going to use these people to solve some of these wraparound support services, interventions, academic, social, emotional in schools and high schools. Right, not a bad thing, but the funding for, the weighted differentiated funding model would be on top of that, and so they would be able to use that for deeper work or for other things. Again, I think I share Bill's concerns. If we want to take a look at this for high schools this year, okay, you start making, gray, fuzzy commitments and expectations in future years. I just think that it could set expectations that maybe we don't have the ability to set just yet.
Yeah. So did someone had their hand up? Nancy, go ahead.
To go back to address the 1 to 50 that's stated up there, there are no caseloads listed in any job description anyway. So that to say 1 to 50 in a job description that doesn't happen. I understand that what you're saying about the general job description, and I think Carla has hit it right on the head when she said that regardless of what the job description really says, that's not necessarily what any of us are doing. The 299,000 in this, really, I mean, it's not like this is the first time that anybody has had the opportunity to see this. This paperwork was all turned into Allison a long time ago and pushed out to everybody here on the team almost a month ago, I think, or 3 weeks or something like that ago. So the 299 has not changed. It's been in there. As far as saying how much it would cost with elementary and middle, we stopped ourselves from doing that intentionally because of enrollment and the issues that we're facing with enrollment, not knowing how many students are coming back into our district or not. And we did not want to put some false number out there that we don't know if that's going to be accurate or it isn't. We did high school because what we saw was that there were fewer high school drops in enrollment than there were elementary and middle in particular, and what Carla said about having fewer years now to work with those high school students who have lost, or I hate to say that they've lost a year of instruction because that's not necessarily true, but have lost the in-person instruction that we have all been used to having and doing. So no, we do not know where the 299 would come from. That wasn't a conversation that we had. I did reach out to Bill to ask him what 2 psychologists would cost. And I don't understand, Bill, one of the things I don't understand is why 2 psychologists cost more than 2 gen ed teachers. I know that there's a difference in the price because the 2.4 FTE was a significant amount less than 2.4 of psychologists or social workers, which I don't understand, but I'm not the budget person. That's why you get paid to do that instead of me.
Okay, so I'm hearing, Tina, please.
I have a process question. This is called an MOU, but it has a recurring fund in it for this school year. And then it has an unknown recurring fund for future school years maybe. Why is it called an MOU for the change in the caseload and for the funding allocation?
So it's called an MOU because we know that this is a process. We're trying to evolve to a better way to use the expertise of school psychologists and social workers. So it's called an MOU because we don't know exactly all the data, we're data geeks in psychology. What are the gains we're going to see from this? So what we said is to implement recommendations for the following years. So it's an MOU because we want to see what is needed so that we can evolve our practice to do our best work. It does not address the caseload for 1 to 50 for middle and elementary school, but that's a meaningless number. It's not the way we're funded. It's not the work we do. If you remember back, I'm sure nobody does, but in the interest statements, my colleagues and I are overworked and underutilized. We really believe we can have an impact on the prevention end of things. I know that because I've been able to do that in schools when I was properly funded. And so this is an attempt to get behind and support that. It's an MOU because it's something we're trying for next year at the high school level.
Okay. I think that in general MOUs have not made a specific recurring monetary request for the next 5 months. like from my experience in this. So usually MOU is more like a committee that looks into it, similar to the middle school committee, and they have a set amount of money that's not recurring that they'll be using for this year, but they didn't make a recurring commitment. So I'm wondering if, just from a process perspective, to take out the high school piece and propose it as part of the contract is more appropriate than as an MOU, because it's reading like a change to the contract, not like an MOU, from my perspective. And I think that's what I'm struggling with a little bit. And then I think just for the public and for me, because I get a little confused when we use the words counselors, psychologists, and social workers, is to try to talk a little bit about the investments we made in elementary counselors over 3 years, 8, 7, 6 years ago, and what were the impact of those counselors at the elementary level, and how are they intersecting with the psychologists and the social workers. And then finally, because we use the word mental health so frequently, I think it would be helpful for the board and for the public to understand what psychologists do, what social workers do, who provides therapy, who doesn't, when do we just connect students, when do we provide a service directly. That's all kind of blurry from a board member perspective, and just some kind of map. Because a lot of people always ask me, like, what does a counselor do at high school? Do I go there for suicide ideation or just to change a course? It's kind of an interesting job, and it would probably be good to create a better encyclopedia of kind of what's going on. Just might be helpful. So I think this is like half of an MOU and half of a contract change, is how this is feeling to me.
I hear that. I think that's really insightful. I think for the high schools, it is a change in expectation, which would be a change in contract. We believe it's the bridge between special ed and general ed, and without having a bridge, we have disproportionality in special ed, and this was an attempt to address that as well as workload. So I hear what you're saying. It's a little bit of both, isn't it?
Okay, so I'm going to, go ahead, Rob.
Just a point of clarification. So the data that we would be looking at for this investment would be a reduction in special education disproportionality. And that's the investment that we're making, and then the expectation would be that over a period of time that this would lead us to be less disproportionate.
I think that would be one of the expectations one would hope to have. I think if you look at Sanchez Elementary, Nativity could probably speak better to this, by increasing the FTE of that school psychologist and supporting that with a BCBA, they've seen a 95% reduction in behavioral incidents, discipline issues. They have no significant disproportionality in that school. Kids of color are not identified more. In fact, they are identified less than majority students. Teachers collaborate with the psychologists and the BCBA to address learning styles. That's why they can not identify kids with disabilities. So that would be some of it, but as an MOU, I think these are the questions we would have, isn't it? Like, well, what do we see? Let's look at disproportionality. Let's look at discipline. Let's look at SR. Let's look at suicide risk assessments. Let's look at threat assessments. Are they going down? Are we seeing some differences? That would be the kind of data one should probably expect to see.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I think that's ambitious. Like, I hear what you're saying. I think that we're, the issue that I thought I heard, which is we just, we need to kind of, switch the way that we do caseload model. Like, I don't want to set the expectation by spending $300,000 that in high school that there's going to be, like, significant disproportionality is an everyone issue. It's not a school psychologist. I could have the best school psychologists in the world, right? You have to have teachers, you have to have administrators, you have to have, it's a community-wide effort as somebody who's done this work for a long time. So, to the extent that we need to set expectations, right? I don't know that that's a realistic expectation. I think that you can look at it and investigate it, but if we find that it isn't working the ways that we hope, that we take it away. Like, I don't think that that's what we're saying either, right? So, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm dominating this conference. I just want to make sure that we get this right, Because if we have to go take something out of the budget to make sure that this is in the budget, which is fine, right? Again, supporting social workers, school psychologists, increasing those, especially where we're at, I do think is a good investment. I just think I want to set the expectations. I do appreciate Tina's comments around, is this, are we embedding contract language in an MOU? I just feel like there's a bunch of work that we still need to do to get this right.
Rob, I think we should be clear that nobody thinks that by hiring 2.4 psychologists and social worker, we're going to get everything we want. This is in collaboration and in consultation with the school as a whole. It's an additional, it's kind of the missing link in our framework, in our support. That's what it is. It's like an additional piece. Of course, it's to work as a team. No psychologist or social worker should carry the weight of all of those things, but it's part of the whole expectation.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Melissa for some comments.
Yeah, I want to give a little bit of background of just kind of how our team approached it. Because in the contract language says 1 to 50. And so part of the problem is that that is not how special ed allocates social worker and psychologists, right? So when we looked at how it's currently funded allocated right now is by school size. So when we approach that to look at, okay, what are the school sizes? How is it differentiated? Is it not? How does special ed allocate it? So that was our first question, but then our second question is well, what is best practice? Which is why we went to the NASP to see, what are other people doing? And the other question that came in is, it would be nice if a school psychologist was just a school psychologist, assisting the 50 kids that are, that they have direct or indirect services with. But that doesn't happen, right? So if a kid comes in and has suicidal ideations, that psychologist is going to support. We also know that psychologists have been pulled in time and time again to that MTSS process. So where we were going with this is that, well, what would, and the reason it's an MOU is because we don't know that this is the perfect answer, right? But how do we look at funding? Because yes, special ed funds psychologists and social workers, and it's really for the job that they're doing with students identified with special needs. They're also doing this other work, really is more of a gen ed initiative that they are doing. And so does that look different, and is that extra allocation their job? I see it very delineated in terms of what their roles would be. I don't know that this is the be-all and end-all process, but I wanted you to understand how we came to the thinking that we did. And so the group had originally brought up looking at caseloads. We need to articulate that and define it in the contract appropriately, because right now it's not correct. And so whether that is just stating that it's by school size, and an MOU is to look at how do we bridge, because really it is the bridge between using that expertise and MTSS, which we know is a huge initiative. How do we do that, and how does that look in order to make sure everything that they're doing, one, is delineated, but also funded appropriately?
Okay, so I'm going to...
So, Mike, can I say one more thing?
Oh, yeah.
So I guess my proposal would be that maybe we do just that, is that saying that it's by, make a very general statement that it's by class or school size, but then look at what psychologists are being asked to do, and then figure out what that, through an MOU, figure out what that should be and what it should look like. Because they're not doing what we're actually asking them to do.
Okay, so I'm going to just, before I go to Bill, I'm going to go to Bill next, but your proposal was to look more specifically at...
Well, my proposal would be, and going back to, in hindsight, it's always easy, right? But in middle school, when we were all day on Monday, we didn't really get to that differentiated funding until the end. I don't think we have a true understanding of what that really means, what schools will get, how. So when we were talking, we did talk about the tiers, and we know where schools are, and making sure that schools that are targeted or high needs are getting extra support. If that comes from the differentiated funding, I think that's totally appropriate. But I think the lack of understanding of, how much schools really get, what they can use it for, what are the priorities, all of that was lacking in terms of just coming up with, a solution. So I'm speaking for myself, not my group. I think it needs to be looked at, and I think there needs to be, I think we need to move forward with something in terms of how do we use psychologists and social workers appropriately. And if we don't give high school extra support right now, we need to look at it. And if people are using their differentiated funding to help use them in MTSS, that's great.
Okay, thanks. Bill, you're on.
I have two suggestions that could possibly move this along. One is to strike out the and elementary and middle schools in the 22-23 school year. So it's not an automatic, and what we're talking about is high schools next year. And then strike out the paragraph around the targeted assistance thing. Whether a school decides that is where they need to invest their resources for the challenges that they have, that's the sort of the school-based decision, rather than having this piece come in with an additional layer, whether it's forcing the spending of those other resources or the something. And I think we do struggle often with layering of things, and so I just would exercise some caution around that. But by taking out that piece and taking out the and elementary and middle schools, it gives us the what would be an ongoing commitment of the 300,000 to put in the additional 2.4 FTE for next year and ongoing. And then, whatever task force, committee, super duper club of people need to get together and figure out what potentially elementary and middle look like. I think my microphone's dying. That work can occur, and then there can be a suggestion for putting additional things in the budget with a little more specificity for the following year.
Okay, so we have a significant proposal to keep this moving forward, and everybody was listening. I'm going to try to recap real quickly. So we're not going to make a commitment to the second year financially. We're going to take out any language that would make a second year commitment. And we would eliminate the duration. And on the first page, we would eliminate the last paragraph that again has that extended commitment. But what we would end up with is money allocated for this school year to do the 2.4, and a task force ongoing to study the results of that implementation and make recommendations for potential elementary and middle level adjustments. Is that?
To clarify, it would be an ongoing commitment for that high school piece to put that in place. So not just a 1 year implementation, but just what is, it doesn't, eliminates the commitment to make further nebulous changes into the future, to give folks some time to pull together what that might need to look like and come up with some estimates and whatnot. And then yes, taking out the adding an additional, the piece about the differentiation based on the tiered model.
Okay. So look at this proposal in conjunction with the current differentiation in funding. Okay, take it out. Okay, good. Okay, so was everybody able to follow those recommendations with regards to the language we're looking at?
So I guess I would just add that if we take out the differentiation, we need to go back because a lot of that, well, I can't say a lot. I'd have to go back and look at our numbers as we did it, that it wouldn't be 2.4. And so if we're leaving the additional 0.5, or whatever we said it was, we actually would be taking that out. So we actually would really need to come back with a different number because it may just even itself out.
Yeah, I didn't follow that. So maybe you could enlighten all of us.
So I read the school size bullets in there as the proposal to meet the needs as defined. The additional supports, you're saying that additional amount is also creates that 2.4 need, so by taking out that differentiated funding, it might reduce that even further?
Correct.
Bueno.
I think I recall 1.8. I think there were two schools that were going to get an additional one the 0.5 and one a 0.2. So the total would be 1.8, taking out the additional piece. I could be a little off.
Okay, I'm going to just do a quick check. Assuming we can work out the details of what you just heard, is there any disagreement with the intent of this proposal as stated by these recommendations? Yes. You need a microphone.
I want to make sure that we're being clear, because when I look at this MOU, it's specific to MTSS. And the piece we just signed off on where we were looking at caseloads says that 1 to 50 guideline is going to be reviewed in 2023 as part of the MOU. I don't think we're trying to completely change the way psychologists and social workers are staffed. And we don't want to commingle those decisions because they're on different review paths. So I think the purpose of this MOU is to really look at how are we bridging those supports around MTSS. So I want to make sure that that clarification is part of this conversation.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask the people that worked on this, does that clarification help? And do you know what you need to do with the language to address that? As the facilitator, I'm not familiar with special education or MTSS.
I think because we're adopting the practice model, we just didn't want to put all that language in here. It felt like that's putting a job description in here. So I can understand that for those schools that are getting the increase to do the MTSS, that we could have it would be more clear the expectations that I think could fit. What my concern is I'd like to keep in the piece of, as we are doing this, we are looking at elementary and middle school as well, because at least as far as significant disproportionality, that happens very early. And I do feel like this will have an impact. So I just want to keep that piece in there, Bill. You suggested taking it out.
Yeah, my heartburn is with having it basically explicitly state that it will be rolled out in whatever tiered model is defined, and all of that is, there's no definition to it as of yet. And so it definitely, a group of people, whatever they're working on can come up with a suggestion, recommendation, or whatever that needs to be. But this is, my suggestion is that this agreement, MOU, whatever, is explicitly about putting in place something for the high school next year, and then, the a team, whatever, can look at what needs to be developed.
Yeah, and I think that was the intent. So maybe we'll kind of use like the middle school has this committee that will look at things, that will provide ideas. I think that was our intent, Bill.
Okay, so what I'm hearing now, oh, go ahead.
To Kathleen's point, I think there's two issues. I think there's one under the special education in the contract, how the caseloads are set up, right? So it's by school size, and so the bullets kind of address it. For the most part, I don't think we change those that significantly, but it's not really written anywhere either of what special education does. I think that's one issue in and of itself. And in the language, it talks about special ed. That is their special ed role, just for special ed. I think the second issue then becomes MTSS. And so in the language under C25 special ed, we said school psychologists and social workers will serve as the bridge and help, with collaboration and consultation. So if that, to me, that's the second part, and it's outside of the special ed language, because as we've said, MTSS is not, we don't want it to be in the special ed world, but we want to use the expertise. And so that's where I go back of, we may just need to define that it's school size is how the special ed allocations are created. And then we need to look at MTSS as a totally separate thing. But if we're using the expertise of psychologists and social workers, what does that look like? Is that included in their special ed FTE? And if not, how do we make it so that it's different?
Okay, so if we were early in the process, we could have this group go back and rework this based on all the feedback we've gotten today. I'm going to just do a check that I'm hearing that we may be able to go forward with funding for the high school of 2.4 FTE, that we can go forward with a task force that would evaluate what happens at the high school level and look at recommendations for potential expansion to the elementary and middle level. And what I heard were those were the key points: keeping special ed allocations and differentiated funding kind of in a separate pile and look at this specific issue through this task force. Anybody that worked on this group that would like to clarify anything I just said? So what I don't want to do is send this group out to do a rewrite, and they're going to bring back something that we have disagreement with. So I'm just going to ask if there's disagreement with the parameters as they seem to have percolated down that I just mentioned.
I think in terms of what you said about funding being available, I don't think that is what is being said. Mike had said that one of the parameters was that money would be available, and I'm not hearing that it would necessarily be available. So I think that needs to be clarified, because that's not a parameter.
So we would, if the money were available, we could move forward with this concept. Okay. All right. So I think I'm just going to, move us forward with this and not lose this work. But I would be open to, now that we've identified the issues and some additional parameters, my thought would be to ask this task force or this work group to create some proposed language based on this conversation. And I'm not sure what the appropriate forum would be to share that language. And during that time that they're putting that language together, there would be an investigation to see if there was any available funding for this implementation at the high school level. Sure.
So being that there seems to be considerable amount of rewrite for the MOU, and looking at the allocation might change from what Melissa said, I think there needs to be a deeper understanding of the task force and what that task force is going to do. And my recommendation would be to the team that worked on this, once that is rewritten and you talk about it, or maybe, also approach some high school principals. Since it's an MOU, and I'm looking at Terry for, for guidance here, I think that moving forward is something we can address through the LMT group, being that Bill is part of the group, and so is Mike Grottos and Rob and BVEA. But with the guidance of the committee, rewriting or completing the study that needs to be done, and then that can be brought to the LMT group. It would be my suggestion.
And then that language would be included in this agreement, or would it just, how would that
Well,
work?
in reality, my understanding is an MOU can be brought in at any time. We've done that, in the last 3 years. I mean, the agreement is there, and MOU can be added if agreed upon at any time. So ideally, yeah, it would be great that we could close this up and have that understanding. I don't feel comfortable enough myself moving forward with all these edits and changes that need to happen. And I don't think I have a clear understanding of the process. With Bill, the things he needs to look at, obviously, and what those numbers here might change. So my recommendation would be that the group has the time to look at it, maybe consult high school principals, as it was mentioned, look at the true financial impact of this and the budget, because if the money is not there, we obviously can't move forward with this year, but it might mean that the task force can start, and then the allocation could be for the following year. I'm just throwing out some suggestions for us to move forward. And I do believe, since it's an MOU, we can, at any point, sign that through LMT if there is no disagreement.
Okay, thank you. Rob, would you like to?
No, I agree with that approach. I think that would allow us to move forward. I think that there's been a lot of really great conversation. I think that I want to honor the work of this group. I do think that Bill and I need to get together and take a look at what would be the budget shifts that we would make to be able to make this happen. But LMT is a great place where we, on a monthly basis, do lots of great work and advance the interests of the greater group forward. So I do think that that's a good move.
Okay. Carl, need a microphone?
It sounds like it's worth going back and really looking at this in that way. I'd like to know if we can have a commitment to looking at this in an MOU style before the end of this school year. And also, I think if we are now continuing 1 to 50 caseload, which is it's baseless, I would like to take out the paragraph that suggests that school psychologists and social workers are work with MTSS and move it to an MOU or to that language, because otherwise I feel like I have just increased my colleagues' workload, and that's not the intention of this. I was trying to name what we do, but it seems like that would be reasonable to go back to labor management. Do you have meetings between now and the end of the year? All right.
Okay. So I'm going to keep us moving, and you heard the conversation. there's a recommendation for the group to take this MOU, send it back to the committee, rewrite it based on the information they received today, share it with the labor management team so that they can further investigate that language as well as looking at potential funding, and then bring that back to the team to let them know how it's moving forward. And one extra item would be that some effort is made to address this issue yet this school year. So is there any disagreement with moving this issue forward based on those terms at this point? Moving this issue, any disagreement?
Mike, I don't have a
Yes.
disagreement. I just would like on page 7, C25, I'd like to scratch that second paragraph and move that into the work of this committee, this
Okay.
MOU. I think that's a better place for it, and I think it's the intention was there.
And this is another item that we've already
It's
signed
an
up
item
on?
we already approved of, so I'm asking that we take it off of there. The MTSS is gen ed responsibility and initiative, but oftentimes specialists can be experts in offering interventions. School psychologists and social workers will serve as the bridge between MTSS and special education. And then it goes on. I'd like to omit that paragraph and have this MOU group consider it in a different place.
Okay, here's what I would like to do to move this forward is to take that last request and deal with that as a separate issue and just see if we have any disagreement with the task force bringing forth a new MOU for district or for the labor management team to take a deep look at. Is there any disagreement with moving forward with that? All right, so we're going to try to do that yet this school year. It sounds like there's no disagreement. Now the second issue, and I'm just going to pose a question, changing that paragraph in language that we've already approved, is that going to change the job description of the people that are addressed in that paragraph? Okay. All right, and you've already spoken to that. Are there any questions or concerns about moving back to that paragraph of language you've already approved?
The only thing I'm concerned about is when we have already tentatively agreed contract language, now we're going back
Right.
to eliminate. I think maybe what should happen is, what I think Patty suggested is a good one, for us to actually examine and analyze what it could look like. To Melissa's point about the role and the description of the school psychs and social workers should be distinguished and defined. It needs to be redone. That needs to be revised. Then to share with LMT and then the bigger group after it's all done and said, I think would be the best thing to do at this point.
Okay.
Because even if we do draw an MOU, it's still a study item that goes on next year.
Right.
But I think to get it done and to move forward, if we can just do that, I have real concerns going back to something we've already agreed to.
So Carla, would that address your needs?
She needs a mic.
Oops.
Make sure we got mics. I need that.
I guess my only concern is that we have effectively changed the job description for school psychologists and social workers, which we hoped to address through the MOU. But now we're putting the MOU to a different place, and that's agreed, absolutely agreed. But when we say psychologists and social workers will serve as the bridge, we have effectively changed the job description without any support in terms of the FTE. We're still working with a caseload that makes no sense. So I'm just respectfully asking for it to be moved. Yes, we agreed on it, but we probably didn't think we were going to be here with the MOU.
I would say leave the paragraph there for now. The group is going to get back together to fine-tune what this MOU says. I would like to have a commitment that the LMT will get together before the end of the school year to look at this. And I think if the LMT looks at this by the end of the school year, we're good to go. Carla, I hear what you're saying about the paragraph in the contract, but I agree with Mike. We've already agreed that that should be there. That really is our goal in doing all of this to begin with. So if we go back and rewrite the MOU, and the LMT looks at that MOU before the end of the school year, I think we're good to go with what we have.
Yeah, you'll have that commitment before the end of the school year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Carla, yeah. Will that meet your needs with regards to this language at this time? Okay, great. Well, I think we have oh, go ahead.
So my only concern, and I think it goes back to process of as we're TAing things that before we look at the whole picture, because in our group, they really, both things tied together and one is dependent upon the other. And so realistically, TAing something when we hadn't gone through the MOU, I think just process-wise was probably a mistake. My concern about not deleting the paragraph is that we are saying that they will do it, but yet their current job description, the current way we fund them, does not give them the ability to do that. And so that's my fear of, yes, we're working towards it, but an MOU is just to work on it. And until we get there, I just really don't think it should be language.
Rob, would you like to comment?
Yeah, so I just think there's a lot of things in this process. Like anytime that we tentatively agree anything, they're all really interconnected, right? When we made the commitment to compensation first, right? Which I hear what you're saying. I think that, you know, part of this process is trust, right? I think that I would ask this group to trust LMT and going back and trying to make this work. Before the end of the year. I think that Mike has made that solid commitment. We've just asked for your trust to try to figure this out. We've heard everyone's concerns, right? We haven't dismissed any of those concerns. It's just working through the logistics and figuring that out.
All right, so are there any additional questions or comments with regards to moving forward with the task force bringing new language back and the labor management team working yet this year to move this issue forward, knowing that we have approved language that impacts this work, nature of the process to some extent? Okay, seeing no disagreement with moving forward, I think there's an understanding that there's a commitment from both parties to make sure this issue gets addressed and that we're not going to be able to do that now, but Patty pointed out that MOUs can be dealt with in a different format and we're not going to lose this work. So with that, what issues do we have left?
Honor the group.
Oh yeah, let's have the group come to the middle, please, that worked really hard on this.
Let's have the whole committee come forward to the center. I'm going to ask Stacy to honor this group.
I want to honor this group for all the hard work they did, and even though we didn't come to some conclusion today, I suspect that we will at some point, and we all thank you for your hard work.
Okay, our next, so I'm going to mark a line through here. This is TBD. And then we have high flex and we have this representative committee thing to do. Yes?
I think we need to do high flex and
Kind of nixed that the last time
Okay.
because there was already an agreement.
And nobody signed it. Okay.
Yes, we're good.
Great. Oh, darn. All right, so we did that one already. Check it out. So we have one more. That was even quicker, Chris. We have one more thing to look at today, and it's the representation on committees having to do with teacher workload and all that together. So who are my presenters for that?
Chris and I.
Chris and Nancy, you're going to do it. And would you guys pick a responder?
Let's go with Terry. Would you be our responder? Or no, you on the committee? Were you on the committee? No. Okay, yes. Terry.
Terry's a responder, and Terry, you have a backup.
I'll pick Stacy.
Stacy, she's coming in at the clutch. Okay.
Okay, you want me to start? So this came to us as teacher workload, and when we started looking at this, we really had a lot of in-depth discussion about what teacher workload is, what part of teacher workload could we really affect change on. And one of the things that we decided we would really look at would be committee membership and how we could provide good membership on committees for people. So the purpose was to increase the opportunity and access for all staff to participate in representation on committees, task forces, the development of curriculum, etc. We agree that innovative approaches will be used to invite involvement and/or provide a means for access in addition to in-person meetings. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, every committee was expected to meet in person. Using innovative approaches to hold these meetings, equal opportunity and access will be available for educators. Educators who must meet outside the school day will be paid at the curriculum rate or will be offered appropriate leadership credit, which is something that happens currently for most committees. We will gather information and data during the 21-22 school year regarding the efficacy of this MOU. Data to be collected will include but not be limited to the following. Did participation in meetings increase? Were participants able to join a committee for the first time? Did participants appreciate these innovative methods versus only in-person meetings? Do stakeholders feel more engaged using these approaches? And did we meet the outcome of a decrease in workload? Chris, I'll let you talk a little bit about why we decided that this might be a good idea and what was limiting people before.
Short, sweet, and simple. When we go all the way back to concern statements, it was, wow, there are a lot of good ideas that come out of committees, but a lot of times teachers don't hear them until they end up on our plate. So what we wanted was more of a voice. What we felt really would help is if we were given the opportunity to have more of a voice. But to do that, you need to take the workload partially off of teachers who have families, teachers who come from small buildings where everybody's got to be on a committee. And what COVID has taught us is there's a lot of stuff we can do without always having to be face-to-face. And you may very well, even if your small child rolls in, I'm sure you've all seen the video, while you're in the middle of that meeting or your cat jumps in your lap, you can still participate, you can still offer your input to what's going on. So we wanted to take those barriers away because even one extra committee and that 20 to however many minute drive in and back and meals and babysitters, or the fact that if you're in a very small building, you often find yourself on 3 or sometimes 4 required committees already. So what we're asking and what this says is, okay, now that we have committees, let's be innovative. Let's not make them all in person. How can we include more people? And kind of on the BVEA end, how do we encourage people who haven't participated on a regular basis to do so? By making it easier.
Terry needs a microphone, and she will. Terry, the questions are, what did you, how do you feel about what you heard? What do you feel this language addresses the issue, meets the needs of all affected parties, and helps facilitate our best possible outcomes? And do you have any questions or clarifications?
Thank you. I like this MOU because I think many of us have realized this year that we can have virtual meetings. We can get a lot of work done that doesn't require being face-to-face in person, even though we do certainly appreciate those opportunities. But I know having been on our negotiations committee, many, many meetings that went well over 2 hours, the fact that we were already home and we didn't have to drive home after all that work made a big difference. And I think increasing the accessibility for people in the district to participate in task forces, committees, all the great work that our school district requires is awesome, and that we should continue to provide that opportunity. So I think this MOU accomplishes that, and I appreciate it.
All right. And Stacy, do you have anything to add that you heard differently, and how do you feel about what you heard? Do you feel this language addresses the issue, meets the needs of affected parties, and helps us facilitate our best possible outcomes? And any questions or clarifications?
Yeah, I also think more participation is always better than less. My one question, though, and concern is, in my experience over the past year and a half, meetings work best when either everyone is in person or everyone is remote. When it's half and half, it's not as productive. And so I wonder if that has come into play in any of your discussions.
Nancy or Chris?
It absolutely did come. We talked a lot about that, and we talked about how in a lot of ways it's not a lot different than high flex teaching has been. So you set up the camera, you put the computer there, and I think actually even with the small groups that we did, there were a lot of times that we had board members join us through the computer, and it seemed to work pretty well. So I think it's something that, teacher workload is a huge issue, but there's only so much that we can do for teacher workload. I think addressing assessment, which we've already done, is one of those things that's going to make a big difference. And this was one way that we thought, this is something that we can do that will help with some of that teacher workload stuff. Yes, we did talk about that, though, about how effective it could be or might not be. And I think it's something that we just have to commit to making the people who might be on camera or on a computer or whatever feel part of the group and feel heard.
I think it's a great idea. I actually think maybe PTOs and PTAs should try and do the same to get more participation. But anyway, so I feel good about this too.
Mike Grados, do you have something?
Just to reiterate, there's questions even in the MOU, but we'll collect data to see what participation will look like. So, but Stacy, you just brought up a really good idea for some of you principals in here about PTOs. Great idea.
Yeah, that is a great idea. And side effect of having us all in the room and all engaged, I guess not in the room necessarily, but okay. Any other questions for the group, the larger group? Questions, clarifications? Okay. Is there any disagreement with moving forward with this proposal as it is now? Congratulations, you have a tentative agreement. Let's have the folks give a hand. Let's have the folks who signed things come on out to the center, and let's have the whole committee that worked on it come on out. As everyone looks at that over and finishes the signing, I'm going to ask Lori to honor this group for the work they did.
I want to thank you. Okay, here we go. I want to thank you all for the work that you did on this committee, and I think that encouraging flexibility and more participation is a great way for us to go as a district. So thanks for your work.
Okay, everybody, let's all stand up and come out to the center, and we're going to stand kind of shoulder to shoulder here. Maybe not super close, but all right. Do you have the question, Mike?
Sure. Turn this on one more time. There we go. So, where am I going to start? I'm going to start with Bill, and we're going to go this way. And here's what I want you to respond to. How do you feel about the work that we did together to reach a multi-year agreement? How do you feel about the work we've just done together in order to reach a multi-year agreement?
Satisfied? Satisfied?
Good.
And you can
You can use more than one word.
yeah,
Yeah.
as long as you want.
I feel like this was good, hard work. I feel like we used the consensus model in the way that we should, and I'm satisfied.
Good.
Impressive.
I'm tired and I have more work ahead of me.
I feel like the work was complex but ultimately beneficial to our students who are why we're all here.
I'm impressed with all the hard work that went into all of this.
It was good.
It's been a really challenging year, so I'm impressed with us. Good job, everybody.
So I'm very grateful for all the work everyone has put in. It has been challenging at times. This is part of the process. How do we all get to know each other a little better and work together towards the same goal? I always say our target. What's our target? What's best for students? And BVSD has an incredible commitment to all our students, families, community, and all our teachers, staff, educators, every single person in such an unthinkable year of so many changes and the adaptability that everyone has had to endure. So I'm very grateful for all of you and appreciative, and I'm very optimistic that as our work continues, we will always continue to look at our target, our wonderful students.
I echo everything that everybody has said up to this point.
I'm very satisfied and relieved that we're moving forward in a district that with items we have never seen before around our kids of color, our teachers of color, and that equal representation that we need. So I'm very relieved about that. I'm glad to see it in the preamble. I'm glad to see it in the language. I'm glad to see the committees that will form that will actually analyze those barriers and get rid of those barriers so we can do more for kids.
I feel a sense of accomplishment. I think that, in our first meeting, I talked about this language, this contract being a commitment to one another and also important on setting the conditions for success for our students. And I believe that we made some really great strides in creating the right conditions for our employees to make sure that they're serving our kids. So thank you, everyone.
I feel pretty happy.
If only we could move consensus to the halls of Congress. In all honesty, because, part of consensus is, can you live with it? Instead of I win, you lose, you win, I lose. You guys have taught me a lot about this, having never done it before. And, I'm proud to have accomplished something because that's part of why we're in this business. And it's not for aggrandizement. It's I want to accomplish something for the kids, for the school district. And so, yeah, consensus, period.
I feel like we made some really great strides moving forward and an even better base to build on.
I feel good.
I feel excited about the work and anticipate that people outside the circle will feel the same.
I think our consensus process was very successful. I'm very pleased.
I feel validated and encouraged.
I was just glad that we could finish in the time allotted. And I mean that so that we can finish the year with something moving forward and one more thing that we did.
I just feel grateful to be in a room full of people who all put kids at the front of everything that we do. So I feel grateful for all of you. And I'm happy that we are getting to where we got to so far.
I found this to be very worthwhile, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to participate.
I started.
Okay, I'm gonna add one little back on, right? So I would like the school board members that participated to go to the center. And I'm going to ask Patty to honor their commitment to our work.
First of all, thank you so much for your commitment to our whole community. I know this is an incredible job, and especially this year, I'm sure you've received more emails than you ever thought in your life you would receive. But we're so grateful for your leadership, the commitment to our students, the commitment to our district, to every staff member, and always thinking about the big picture is so important, because that is your job. But we are grateful that you spent this time, because it shows the value you place on everything we do every day. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, just wanted, we had honored people, but I knew this was a group that we hadn't had in the center, and they're here as volunteers, so.
All right, great job, everybody. We'll see you next time, whenever that is.